In the White Demon Castle, the Demon Lord presents herself in flight, who is in conflict with a certain man named Saint Chen Bai. The girl says that the boy's failures in this mission have put her in a very bad mood, and in this case, she is about to send the boy to the afterlife. In the face of this accusation, the man tries to defend himself, pleading with his Dark Lord to consider his mistakes and give him another chance. However, the demon woman claims that humble humans have no right to demand opportunities, especially in the magical White Castle. All will be obliterated along with the coming darkness that was getting closer and closer. With almost no choices, that man gathers all his strength to survive while he still can. However, inevitably, the worst happens to the boy who completed almost 100 tasks for the woman, but because of just one simple failure, he was discarded. In his mind, the question of this happening because he is human was the most plausible at the moment. As he falls defeated into a stream, the man begins to go mad, refusing to accept his situation. He then laughs uncontrollably like someone who had already lost all moral lines, and he shows his middle finger to his former master Heloise as an obvious sign of contempt. However, he doesn't have time to vent his feelings as he is quickly drowned in the river by the demon woman. With his end approaching, the former servant of the demons finds himself in endless darkness. But a pendant that the man carried would change everything when he ordered it to reverse. Sometime later, the hero wakes up in his room on a day like any other but still reacts as if he were in conflict with his master. Coming to reality, he realizes he is not dead and wonders where he is. Looking around, he sees the dormitory from his school days and doesn't understand how he ended up there since his memory of being finished by his former boss was clear. All the decades of judgment felt extremely real. In this case, the protagonist questions if he is in a dream but ends up noticing his hourglass. The hourglass is an item he obtained 20 years after the arrival of the universal will when the judgment began. This was probably the most unique item the hero had ever seen, being able to show any attributes and not being able to be destroyed, so he continued to carry it with him. He remembers that the sand was at the bottom and couldn't flow even if you turned it upside down, but now the sand is at the top. The sand is flowing backward and time is reversing. In such a case, it is logical to think that real time is actually different. Looking at his cell phone, the thought is confirmed because the present is set on June 5, 2032, 10 days before the Universal will start its judgment. 10 days later, on June 15, the Universal will officially arrive and begin the judgment. On that day, more than 90% of humanity will die. Additionally, the dead humans will turn into zombies and horrible monsters. It is also said that conventional weapons will fail and the world will witness its end in just one night. However, along with the dangers that the universal judgment will bring, opportunities for those who survive will also come, imbued with supernatural innate abilities. Several magical equipment and items copied in large quantities will also descend to Earth along with the universal will. It is a fact that there are 3 things that attract even God, who controls the rules of the universe. These gods cannot interfere directly with the will, so they attract humans under their protective tutelage, guaranteeing them benefits for it. In his past life, the hero wasn't strong enough, so after paying a high price, he finally joined Heloise's commands. Thus, the protagonist desperately completed the tasks she suggested, trying to increase his status but never imagined being eliminated just for failing one mission. Reading the news on his cell phone, it mentions zombie rabbits being sighted, as well as patients starting to bite each other, among other abnormalities. The signs are starting to repeat, but this time the hero decided he would become very strong enough so that no god could mess with him. 10 years ago, when the judgment began, someone claimed the only way discovered to increase innate abilities. He said that 10 days before the judgment started, the innate abilities actually became effective, and if discovered and used, they could be upgraded. In his previous life, the hero had an innate rank E ability, which gave him virus resistance. According to this method, he believes he can unlock his abilities to finally get ahead of others in advantage. Inside the hospital, a doctor tells the nurse that the patient's symptoms are very strange, and the woman relates the situation to what is seen in movies. Inside one of the hospital rooms, it was visible that the man had turned into a zombie. In this case, to train his innate virus resistance ability, the hero can only rely on the man. After drawing some blood from a poisoned vein, our protagonist believes this should be enough to unlock his innate ability. Since no one is in the dormitory at the moment, this is a clear opportunity to stay there all night. However, if his theory is wrong, he will most likely die right there. With courage, the protagonist tries to forget the chances of failure, focusing on those of success, and injects the zombifying compound into his arm. If he awakens an E-rank ability again, even though in the future he will lose many opportunities due to his weakness, so hesitation is not an option. At that moment, the hero collapses to the ground due to the potency of the injected toxin, and he briefly awakens in a dark scenario in front of the demon woman. She called for Chen Bai temptingly, saying for him to give up this pathetic resistance and finally embrace the darkness. As a low-level human, being part of the darkness would be the best choice for him. With some difficulty in communicating, the protagonist says hello to his former master Heloise. But this time he will not submit, so he says he will dominate the woman for everything she made him go through. After spending the whole night resisting the zombie toxin, Chen finally gets up in the morning, but he seems different than usual. At that exact moment, apparently the zombie virus had completely taken over the hero's mind, which scared his roommates when they went to visit their friend. They panic and try to prepare themselves as best they can to defend, with one even equipping himself with a broom. But fortunately, the protagonist manages to regain his sanity and overcome the toxin. In light of this, Chen's friends still maintain a combat stance, but the hero begins to return to normal, casually conversing with them. As if nothing had happened, he says he will go to the bathroom to wash his face, and his colleagues do not quite understand what had occurred. Inside the bathroom, Chen can finally reveal his true feelings, becoming extremely happy that his theory was correct. The zombie virus did not kill him, and his innate abilities were successfully increased. In this case, he cannot even imagine how strong he will become after awakening. Suddenly, the voice of the Universal will congratulate Chen Bai for being selected as a pioneer, and he receives the title of Pioneer in Early Awakening. If indeed awakened, the hero decides to try to open the system interface and realizes that this title gave him a very good skill boost. After this, Chen tries to open the Innate Abilities panel, coming across the unbelievable innate ability of Virus Monarch SSS rank. The Virus Monarch ability is the most powerful among the virus elements. It can absorb, utilize, manipulate, transform, and even create viruses. But currently, the hero only has the ability to absorb viruses, and the absorption range is limited. In this case, he needs a mass of viruses to enhance his ability. Naturally, the hospital would be the best place to get these viruses. However, upon arriving at the entrance of the place, Chen Bai is greeted by numerous zombies running to attack the people nearby. Everyone panics upon seeing such monsters and says the end of the world must be happening. Ken, for his part, began to remember everything. In his previous life, he heard people talk about this, the name of 3 strange incidents that happened in Jiangqing even before the judgment arrived. One of them was named the Sealed Hospital. In this case, this must be it. Contrary to expectations, the hero is happy, believing he arrived at the right moment. He courageously goes after one of the zombies, and incredibly, he manages to take down the monster, getting on top of it and placing his hand on its face. In this way, Chen activates the innate power of his Virus Monarch ability, Virus Absorption, managing to extract the zombie toxin and gaining a skill point. On this day, the hero was determined not to let any of the monsters escape, as they would become important points in the system. Meanwhile, in a bathroom on the 4th floor of the hospital, zombies surround a man who was doing his business. Aware of his situation, he believes his end is near as he has no way to escape. However, the boy was not alone, having the company of a girl. She asks her director what they should do while crying on the floor. Suddenly, the man's expression changes drastically, given that his death is already certain. Like a true sexual predator, the boy claims he has been pursuing the woman for a long time, and she never accepted. In this case, now he can do whatever he wants. However, before even managing to fulfill his last obscene desire, one of the zombies manages to break the bathroom door and consequently enter the place. This despairs the man who, putting all his morality aside, pulls the woman to stand in front of him as a survival instinct. Among all things, the boy was more than determined to live. As his last option, he understands that he is only on the 4th floor and decides to try his luck by jumping out the window to survive. However, his attempt fails when the man gets his body stuck on the window ledge while trying to jump. He then faints, but at least the zombie chasing him was thrown down the building. After several minutes, our hero finally arrives at the scene after already looting the zombies from the previous floors. He finds the nurse woman from before who is now undergoing zombification. Chen thinks this could be a good test subject for him as apparently she has just been bitten. In this case, there is probably still time to save her. The kiddo knows that the military will arrive soon to completely seal the place, so he needs someone who understands the hospital to lead the way. In an attempt to suck all the zombie virus out of the girl, our protagonist does his best to stop her zombification. With the correct use of his ability, fortunately, the toxin is eliminated and the girl wakes up healthy. The nurse in turn realizes that the man in front of her saved her life, in which case she thanks him. Analyzing the woman, Chen comments that apparently she didn't lose consciousness completely, which is confirmed by the nurse. In this case, the hero asks her if she needs any help at the moment, and the nurse, despite having already been saved, informs that she would like some new clothes. However, our protagonist says that they don't have time for that and tells the woman to just guide him to the place in the hospital where there are more viruses. After a few minutes of running, they arrive at the laboratory, which is the place where patients' clinical samples are tested. With a few virus vials in hand, the protagonist says this should be enough, and the nurse worries about what the hero is planning to do. As he tries to concentrate, he tells the woman to shut up and then absorbs all the pathogens, gaining significant boosts in his status. After absorbing all that, the next step is to strengthen the zombie virus with all the others. Inside Chen's body, there are several cores of infectious agents which can be enhanced, and at the moment, it is noticeable that the most efficient is being strengthened. The Black Darkness virus is the best choice as it increases all attributes by 10 and regeneration abilities by 200%. Moreover, it grants the ability to envelop and devour. This is a core primarily focused on devouring and evolving. Interrupting Chen's thoughts, the woman desperately warns that zombies are entering through the door. However, our hero responds calmly, just asking her not to move from where she is. So he approaches the monster, and an instant after his evolution, Chen became much faster than before, even managing to lift a heavy zombie with one hand. In this case, this is a good opportunity for him to test his new abilities. Then Chen envelops the monster with a black light pathogen, consuming it entirely, completing his evolution ability and devouring it with absolute success. Little by little, the black virus returns inside the hero's body, and he is satisfied with the absorption speed, feeling his stamina somewhat recovered. The nurse in turn is very scared by what she just saw, stuttering to ask questions. However, when questioned by Chen about what she wants to know, she decides to put her questions aside, as at that moment it is not important. Since he saved her, she said she would believe in the man and keep his secret to herself. As proposed, our hero introduces himself to the nurse as Chen Bai, and the woman responds, informing that her name is Suk Sin. Suddenly, a very strange noise begins to approach the clinical laboratory. Chen thinks that the police and military are there, and they must have already sealed the whole place to eliminate the zombies. In this case, they must leave immediately. As they run through the hospital, our protagonist asks Susin to take him to the roof, and she doesn't understand why they can't leave normally. However, the hero states that they don't have time to be isolated and questioned by the military. Then suddenly, a strengthened zombie very different from the normal ones appears, to the duo's misfortune. Quickly, Chen throws the woman away to face the mutant zombie one-on-one. Seeing the monster, they will have to deal with. Suksin cannot control her emotions, knowing that this is really something never seen before. In front of that monster, our hero prepares for the worst. After having his arm cut, he thinks that is interesting because it is a mutant. Given this, he does not know what kind of evolution the blacklight virus will produce upon absorbing it. At this moment, the monster jumps off the walls, intending to surprise and attack our hero. But as it launches its attack, Chen jumps over the monster, managing to dodge easily, and thrusts his foot into the monster's face with a powerful kick. Once again, our hero jumps around the place to try to confuse the monster's attack pattern. Chen crosses to the other side of the corridor, managing to take hold of a lifeless zombie body and absorb it. But the mutant gives no time for Chen Bai to rest, going towards him again, and apparently his general abilities are on par with the hero. Receiving the monster's charge, our hero counterattacks with his blacklight virus, managing to land a powerful blow that pins the monster to the wall, leaving a hole right in the middle of its chest. After this, Chen distances himself, retreating, and waits to see if his attack was effective. However, unexpectedly, the protagonist's blow caused no damage, in which case he thinks it will take a long time to defeat it. In an attempt to help her savior, Suksin breaks the emergency protection glass and grabs an axe from inside. She then throws the weapon to our hero, who has to dodge an attack from the monster while preparing to catch the axe in the air. He succeeds and thanks his colleague for the good work. Then, stepping on the mutant's shoulder, he says that now he will finish this quickly. Chen delivers several cuts to the monster's chest, but it keeps advancing without stopping, like a true berserker. In this situation, our hero uses his speed along with the axe to attack from various directions and tire the monster out. However, when Chen is finally about to send the mutant to hell, it charges to attack once more. It was surprising that this zombie had managed to withstand everything until now. But finally, its strength comes to an end, and the mutant falls. Then the hero mocks, saying to the monster not to leave open wounds when its death is near. But unexpectedly, the monster's resilience proves immeasurable as it stands up once again and attacks our hero with its two hands right in the middle of his chest. At this moment, Chen starts bleeding, and his nurse colleague completely despairs. The hero's axe falls from his hands, and he thinks he has no choice but to die when playing with death. But even so, the protagonist sees his situation, optimistically asking if the mutant would like to tear him in half, and then opens his stomach, giving way to the blacklight virus, which starts to take over everything around. He finally manages to accomplish his initial goal of absorbing the mutant with his Devour and Evolve ability. At this moment, the roles are reversed, and the hero asks if the monster is scared, but even if it is now, it is too late. Faced with that terrifying image of her friend, Suksin is scared, and the devouring ends up consuming the second stage mutant. The system informs that the blacklight virus will undergo a transformation process, acquiring the zombie's claw ability, the Bone Claws. This made the hero very satisfied, because he was really right when he decided to choose this ability to evolve. For having taken too long in the place, the military finally arrive, pointing their guns at the group and ordering them to keep their hands up. At this moment, the hero tells Sue that he will count to 3, and if there is no action, they will be shot. With the nurse in his arms, the countdown ends, and it is time to take a drastic measure. After the military starts firing, Chen, without looking back, begins to run while being guided by the nurse. She informs where the roof is, but is worried about her savior, who is being shot multiple times. However, he already knows this and states it is alright. Finally reaching the hospital roof, our hero kicks the containment door, breaking it. Given that his objective is complete, Chen asks where the nurse's house is, and she in turn gives her address. Understanding the message, the protagonist suddenly jumps off the building while carrying her in his arms towards the girl's house. After a few minutes of travel, they arrive in the north of Ronfeng on Nanbai Street and manage to enter the house safely. The nurse informs him that the bathroom is on the other side and also offers to help clean and bandage the hero's wound. However, he informs her that it has already healed, but the woman insists on taking a look. Giving in to her insistence, Chen removes all the top parts of his clothing, leaving Suk-sin embarrassed. She, however, mentions that there are still some traces on his stomach and chest that haven't fully healed. Chen then asks if he will recover if he feeds on the nurse, obviously insinuating a non-literal meaning. In this case, the protagonist asks Sue what she thinks about sacrificing herself for him. However, Sue initially refuses, saying that if he really wanted to do that, he would have done it already. But Chen explains that he didn't do it before because their relationship was not appropriate. Then he tears off the top part of the girl's clothing, reiterating his proposal to feed on her to recover. In response, Suk-sin simply asks the man to wash and clean it so it will heal well. Understanding the message, Chen pulls her by the hair and kisses her. After the kiss, the interaction becomes even more romantic and intense. And while the two are making out in the bathroom, Chen's phone rings with someone worriedly asking where he is. Strange things started appearing in Jiangxing before the judgment began. One of them was the case of the sealed hospital, but there was also the suburban bombing and the slaughterhouse monster. Our hero doesn't know much about these three things because there was little information about what happened before the judgment arrived. And moreover, apparently no one cared about it, only occasionally mentioned in some conversations, but today it was giving Chen a headache. Chen answers the phone telling Suk-sin that he bought breakfast and will be back soon, but the woman warns that there are two people looking for him. One of them is Song Zixiang. Sue, however, says that these people do not seem to be good, so it is probably a trap, because Song Zixiang is the queen of Jiangxing. In light of this, Suk-sin asks her savior what she should do, and Chen asks the woman to open the door because what they are saying is true. The woman named Song Zixiang is the mother of Songju, who is a classmate of the hero who had some complications with him. In this case, it seems that the young lady wants to see her mother, but since Song can find a way to go to Suk-sin's, she must know something. In this case, the hero believes it is necessary to go and meet her personally. In the suburban frozen warehouse, you can find both the poor and the rich. It is a place that stands out for its legitimate and illegitimate enterprises. After the tests arrived, the girl awakened an A-level talent, quickly building her own power. Eventually, she unified Jiangxing amid a three-way competition, truly earning the title of queen in the place. She was someone the hero could only watch from afar in his past life. But things are different now, with him being able to recruit her to his side, so there are still many things to do in the interval before the judgment. In front of that woman, Chen Bai is introduced by one of her guards. Then Song Zixiang apologizes to Chen for having to bring him there, but she really couldn't escape. In this case, Chen asks the girl if there is something she wants to know about him. And she explains that she called him because of Cho Ji-ran, who said he lost contact with him in Jiangxing at the hospital, so he asked for her help. With some charm, the woman says that she called the hero to see what kind of man could make Cho Ji so nervous. She wanted to know what was so attractive about him. Chen, on his part, doesn't fall for it and says he doesn't like being beaten behind a bush. In light of this, he asks the woman what her true intention with him is. The woman understands that her friend is quite direct, but states that in any case she wouldn't do anything like that. Thus, the woman asks what the hero thinks of her, because since Chen likes Shoji, being her godson wouldn't be a bad idea. However, our protagonist believes he doesn't have a good reason for that lady to want him. And unexpectedly, Song reveals having seen the man's heroic performance at the hospital. In light of this, it is understandable that anyone would develop feelings. The woman knowing about his previous actions was something that shocked Chen Bai. He says he remembers destroying both the hospital surveillance cameras and the power generator in that situation. It is unlikely the woman discovered it so quickly. But she says not to be underestimated, because at least during the time of entry through the corridor to the monitoring room, her staff managed to monitor the hero. And conveniently, the lady also has someone inside the hospital. After showing her conversation with this person in the hospital, it is clear that the woman was observing all the events, having even filmed Chen's escape with Suk-sin. Song's luck is very good, because among the survivors who left isolation with the troops this morning, she found the nurse's colleague from the video, Liu Feng. This name is familiar to our hero. He remembers the previous night when in his bed the nurse vented about her ex-friend who tried to violate her that day. She detailed everything that happened. In Chen's mind, the man hanging from the window was just someone irrelevant. Hearing this, the woman herself wished the man were dead, because she hates him from the bottom of her heart. Changing the subject, they resume their naughty conversation, since the talk happens after their romantic encounter in the bathroom. Inevitably, they also physically resume their playful activities. In the cargo elevator on the first floor, Mrs. Song is asked where the survivors are, but she says she will only answer if Chen becomes her man. The hero in turn warns that the woman is underestimating him, as she agrees because she only has part of the information, unable to uncover his real abilities. However, Chen says Song misunderstood because she knows very little about him, and if she knew more, she would understand. Turning the tables, demonstrating his abilities, the protagonist explains that he cannot be the woman's man because it is she who should be his. Faced with this strange mutation, Song becomes worried, thinking it is a zombie variant, and one of her guards steps in front to defend her. However, Chen explains that the lady is wrong, but he will only say what is if she decides to become his woman. Seeing Chen's power now, it is Song who says she is being underestimated because just based on those claws he cannot win her over. However, the boy already has a beautiful young nurse with him. In this case, there would be no reason for him to be interested in an older woman like her. Like a true charmer, the protagonist pulls the woman's face, asking who wouldn't be tempted by such a beautiful married woman. Additionally, he invites her to stay with him for a few days before the apocalypse, but Song doesn't understand what he is insinuating because so far only a few zombies have been seen. Seeing this, Chen explains that soon everything happening now will be seen as mere warm-up. In such a case, Song understands that the man must know a lot, and he responds knowing more than she imagines. Realizing that neither of them is the type to easily submit to others, Song suggests they collaborate, with her helping and the hero providing the information. In mutual agreement, the two shake hands, and Chen states that conquering the Queen of Jiangxing is not easy, which she agrees. However, it took a long time for Song to find a man who wanted to conquer her. In this case, she advises the hero to keep trying. Suddenly, the sound of gunfire in the area catches everyone's attention, and they quickly turn to try to understand what is happening. The one explains that the previous night, Commander Huang of the Jiangxing military region sent Captain Zhao to negotiate with her. They requested some refrigerated warehouses to store the living zombies and the survivors who refused to isolate in the hospital. In this case, the gunfire noises probably come from them. Song then wonders if something went wrong because there were only 30 zombies trapped in the warehouse who could barely move. Additionally, half of a platoon was on standby at the location, which made Chen doubt the speed with which the zombies were discovered. However, they didn't know that putting zombies in extreme situations increases their mutative abilities. In this case, connecting the dots, Chen begins to understand where he is. This was the location of the second event, the suburban bombing, so Chen decided to call everyone to take a look because he was interested in the mutation. At the central event location, the zombies start escaping from the freezing chamber, destroying everything around while the military futilely tries to resist. They even reach the point of throwing a grenade at the mutant, which is a huge zombie with arms in its eyes. The smoke from the explosion begins to rise, but little by little the worst possible situation is revealed to the men. That mutant hadn't suffered any damage, now even having captured one of the platoon's soldiers with its hand. Supreme Commander Zhou understands that their weapons are ineffective and orders everyone to form groups of people around the monsters, spreading their attacks. All of this is to buy time until reinforcements arrive, but at the right moment, Song appears, asking the captain to have his troops cease fire and withdraw. Zhao does not understand what the boss is saying. In this case, she explains that there is no way to hurt the monster conventionally, so the best thing to do is not to die in vain. She asks the captain to have the troops protect her warehouse workers and the hospital survivors, and as soon as they can to get them out of there. However, the captain states it is impossible because the monster is not slow, and no one can escape unless someone restrains it. With some confidence in her ally, Song reiterates her request to Zhao, telling him not to worry about the monster because someone will take care of it. Elsewhere on the battlefield, Chen saves Luli's life by stopping the monster's hand when it was about to deliver a fatal blow to the girl. However, Chen Bai realizes that with just one grip his body was almost displaced, and it seems the monster has grown so much that it cannot be defeated by brute force. Coming to attack, the mutant prepares a blow with its enormous hand. Our protagonist activates his claws to counterattack, managing to cause significant damage to the monster due to the difference in speed and flexibility between the two. Very irritated, the mutant tries to charge once more. However, it begins to lose control, entering a state of mental confusion and ends up attacking a nearby building. Seeing all this, the military Zhao comments, impressed that the woman is bringing a monster with her, but she says he is just her partner. The warehouse destroyed by the monster stored large quantities of meat, so Chen climbed one of the piles, telling the monster not to eat any of it, because it will lose that food due to his absorption ability by the virus. That mutant tries to attack our hero, but the evolution devour ability was already activated. With the monster's punch, a shrill sound echoes through the place along with a strong gust of wind. The system prompt is then completed, having consumed a large amount of frozen beef, causing the black light virus to evolve, increasing its strength and resistance. Chen, for his part, praises the quality of the beef, which not only restored his energy but also leveled him up, unlike the monster, which now seems exhausted. Jumping to the rear of the mutant while it tries to regain its strength, Chen activates his claws and says it is time for the monster to die. The zombie notices our protagonist's charge but cannot defend itself, having its face hit. Then it falls to the ground, almost defeated. With blurred vision, the mutant still tries to fight for its life, but our hero's ability returns at the right time, thus enveloping the monster completely with the black light virus, leaving the captain perplexed, unable to believe what he is seeing. With the monster entirely dominated by Chen, he activates evolution by absorption. At a safe distance from the combat, Zhao thinks the man in front of him definitely cannot be human. In this case, the captain notices he has two monsters in front of him that cannot be moved, and quickly decides to use the radio to call reinforcements to deal with both. But just as he is about to give his coordinates, Song intervenes, stopping him. She asks Zhao to think carefully because the man is helping them, having even saved everyone's lives there. In such a case, the captain should not do anything stupid, so things do not get worse for everyone. 10 minutes after that conversation, the military were already on the scene, pointing their guns at our protagonist. The captain stubbornly continued his previous order, now telling everyone to stay on alert. In this case, Song reminds the captain not to forget what she said, and he replies that he will not order his men to attack if the man remains peaceful. At that moment, Chen Bai was receiving many skill boosts from the system, having gained 500 virus points along with the injection ability. Due to the hero having devoured a rare 15th stage mutant of the Meat Mountain type, all black light abilities received a major boost. Additionally, decomposing the monster's power, Chen gained the heavy hammer power. Indeed, a significant evolution occurred, and the manifestation of the protagonist's virus after absorption more than increased. In his mind, Chen thinks the heavy hammer is a powerful weapon, but at the moment, there is nothing he can do to test it. Regardless, for our hero, it is fine because the gain of the day was enormous. Materializing a piece of Meat Mountain essence in his hand, Chen thinks it is a rare material that can be used to make equipment, and if he finds a way to control it, he can even use it to create an infinite meat wall. In this case, if he decides to feed the essence a little more, it is likely that another Meat Mountain zombie will grow to finally test his current strength. However, Song slowly approaches, making our hero hide the essence in his coat. The woman introduces Luli, the woman who was saved by Chen Bai. The protagonist, however, states he already knows the woman as she is not only a famous journalist in Jiangsheng, but also a famous internet celebrity. He asks if it was she who filmed him in the hospital, which is confirmed by the girl who says she was saved by Chen twice. But he says it was just a coincidence and asks if she filmed when he killed the giant monster. In case of a misunderstanding, Lily states she can delete it if it is the man's wish, who in turn only asks her not to send it to anyone. Interrupting the conversation, the captain says the commander of his district expects Chen Bai to explain everything about himself and what he knows about the monsters to them. But initially, the protagonist remains silent regarding the summons. He remembers Commander Huang Exingchu, a name hard to forget, because after the judgment arrived, he coerced the weak awakeners, using them like pigs. At first, they used patriotism and nationalist sentiment to comfort them, but soon after began the beatings and insults. Chen was one of them, struggling and hiding at a time when it was impossible even to have a decent meal. The most ridiculous thing of all was that anyone who tried to escape was accused of treason and then hunted down. This forced Chen to leave Jiangsheng without even looking back. Wanting to know the boss's opinion, our hero asks if he should go and explain everything, being answered that he shouldn't because she herself doesn't have that information. However, the men seem not to be asking, which makes Song intervene to handle it. Captain Zhao, for his part, tells the woman that he hopes she understands the duties of being a citizen of the region. However, she denies having any obligation, telling the captain to stop talking as if he were an officer because he is just a low-ranking platoon leader. Finally, she orders Zhao to tell the commander that if he has any business to discuss, he should come and see her personally. The captain is confused by such boldness, and suddenly a soldier appears saying the isolated people are causing trouble and asking what they should do. Our hero asks if among these people there is someone named Liu Feng, which the soldier confirms, saying he is the one causing the most trouble. Addressing the platoon leader, the protagonist asks to see this troublesome person. Complying with the man's wishes, Zhao orders the soldier to bring Liu Feng to them. Upon arriving at the designated location, the boy asks why the platoon leader called him, questioning if his father had called. It's clear that the man brags about his father being the vice president of the first hospital in Liu Huinan. However, he hardly knew that someone there had business with him. So discreetly, Chen appeared behind Liu Feng and injected him with the zombie virus. After that, he said he was looking for him because someone asked him to deliver a message to the boy. Liu does not recognize Chen, but our hero tells the boy everything Suxen told him the night before in her bed, which leaves the man quite confused. Subsequently, the protagonist tells everyone to step back because according to him, the boy in front of him is about to turn into a zombie. Seeing that this man is setting a trap for him, Liu Feng angrily prepares to charge at him. And due to his high level of stress, the virus spreads through his body, quickly turning that initial action into a totally uncontrolled and animalistic attack. Quickly, Chen Bai uses his ability acquired in his last battle, eliminating the monster with extreme ease. After evaporating Liu Feng from the earth, our hero thinks the ability is not bad, being even stronger than he thought. And then thanks the boss for everything, saying he will give her some information later when he is back. However, she approaches, saying that Chen can call her Zixiang from now on, or Song Ji. When asking the reason for this, Song says she doesn't think it's worth being the hero's partner, now asking if the previous proposal of submission is still on the table. In this case, the protagonist simply responds that it will depend on the woman's value and performance. In a car ride, Song invites our hero to dinner at her house at the time he finds most suitable. However, Chen asks not to be distracted until the moment of arriving at the woman's house, which she understands. In his mind, the protagonist thinks now is the time for the lottery draw, the important moment to see if there is any good reward for defeating the Meat Mountain zombie. Upon opening the inventory, the hero is surprised to find 2 skill books, realizing that his current luck is not so bad. One of the skills is Violent Bloodlust, which increases attributes by 3 times for 10 minutes with a cooldown rate of 1 day, but during the cooldown, attributes drop by 50%. For our hero, this is not useful. However, there's another muscle enhancement, which increases muscle mass, doubling growth along with strength and resistance. However, this also would not be useful because considering his past life experiences, Chen remembers that people who used this skill went crazy. Although these two skills are not useful for Chen, the two books will be very valuable in the early stages of the judgment for ordinary people. Thinking about creating a faction, the protagonist thinks it is time to start planning since he receives 6 gold coins, which is enough to start a group. With the creation of the group, the hero can use it to help pioneers, guaranteeing them a solid foundation in the beginning. Besides that, factions in the final stage will become very complex. The relationships established in the early stages are crucial for future development, so it is time for Chen to choose a name for the guild. He cancels this option, generating a generic name, Group Number 1, and in his mind, the hero says Heloise will rebuild her white empire and create a divine kingdom. And finally, she who made him suffer so much will become the most submissive of dogs under his feet. 3 hours later in Song Zhejiang's private villa, the woman begins to understand about the cosmic judgment in which more than 90% of people will become monsters, besides gifting some survivors with abilities. In light of this, Chen says that this is all that can be said at the moment, but it should be enough for the girl to gain an advantage. To which she responds that it is not enough, and wanting to be direct, asks if she can follow this journey with the hero. However, Chen says that firstly he prioritizes ability, meaning useful people, and secondly loyalty, like a dog to its owner. Reflecting on loyalty, the woman says she can provide. And regarding her ability, she believes she is more than qualified because besides having influence, she also has status, money, and jiangxing in her hands. However, Chen reminds her that the rules and values after the judgment will be completely new, with the current idea of power, status, and money losing their total value. So in this chaotic world, enslaving the woman could be more advantageous in the hero's mind, making her imagine a sale audience where many perverts desire her. After such an explanation, Song asks the difference between being a loyal dog there and a toy somewhere else. Then Chen states that by being on his side, the woman can increase her strength, besides having a master who will not restrain her out of fear. Feeling that hesitating a bit more will lose the opportunity, Song wisely decides to make her decision, standing in front of the hero and kneeling, promising to serve him as her master. In this case, Chen says that the woman's reputation and status make the emotional value she can provide very high. Moreover, he decides to witness the woman's charm personally because he has some tasks for her to do. Elsewhere, the journalist and Song's bodyguard receive a message on their smartphones. For the bodyguard, she is ordered to first take Luli home because after all that happened for recording the videos, she is very tired. After that, she is ordered to find someone to keep the videos away from the media, informing that the post by her is titled For the Pioneers. In light of this, the bodyguard informs Luli that Song wants the video to be recorded on her personal account, and besides that, she will now accompany her to her quarters. In this case, the journalist accepts the help because she really had a hard time in recent days. However, the shock of this day was less than her first time seeing a zombie. But she does not know if this is because she has already accepted her fate of dying at the hands of zombies or because of Chen's strength making her feel safe. Suddenly, a contact named Daughter calls Song's phone. Chen Bai decides to answer while his partner is unavailable. On the other side, a girl calls for her mother, informing that a stranger said he wanted her to go home. Seeing this, she wants to know if something is happening. Breaking the girl's expectations, our hero introduces himself on the call, leaving the woman confused, not knowing why Chen has her mother's phone. When asked where her mother is, the protagonist replies that she is busy working and with little time, so it is best for the girl to go home. The daughter understands the message, telling Chen to wait at home, but now questions him about her mother sending numerous messages to him without any response. However, before she can finish speaking, Chen Bai hangs up the call, making Song's daughter extremely irritated, saying that sooner or later she will make him kneel and apologize to her. At the businesswoman's house, she's kneeling in front of the protagonist, asking if he will also protect her daughter, but according to the hero, she has no abilities. However, it is said that if Song works hard enough, he will ensure that her daughter probably does not become a monster when the judgment arrives. Thus, the woman is very satisfied, thanking her master for his kindness. Back at the secret suburban warehouse, the daughter asks her mother if she is being deceived by the protagonist, not understanding how she can believe in something like this. Song in turn explains that she didn't let her look at Chen last night because of this, so after getting out of the car, she should not say anything, just look. In front of the warehouse, the bodyguard explains to the boy that she visited all the places with zombie rumors in the city the previous day, and in the end, only this place was found. This place was used as an illegal casino, but now both the house and the players have become zombies, estimated to have about 160 of them along with some special ones. Definitely this information interests the young hero. Facing this new challenge, Chen Bai orders the staff to open the door, and quickly, as soon as the gates are open, the zombies start pouring out, wildly scaring the employees. The mad and uncontrolled herd rushes at our hero, kicking up dust and creating a chaotic atmosphere. However, the protagonist is prepared for all adversities, receiving the first of the zombies with a kick to its stomach. This also scares the women who are watching the fight from a distance. At this moment, the protagonist begins using his virus absorption ability on the defeated zombies, and the system congratulates him on obtaining the title of Zombie Slayer, having killed more than 300 of them. This title increases all attributes by 5 along with damage to zombies, which goes up by 5%. Moreover, he collects 500 virus points, being able to upgrade the zombie virus formula using the points in the talent tree. Our hero remembers this serum formula, which is a very valuable item capable of awakening talents that can be dangerous to the zombie virus. Then calling for Song, he says that now everyone can enter, also asking if she remembers what was said before, which is confirmed by the woman while holding a baseball bat. Previously, Shinbai explained that fighting zombies using melee weapons would decrease the chance of becoming a monster when the judgment begins. In this case, the hero now wants to test the strength of the girls holding a zombie by its neck and asking who will be the first to finish it. Promptly, the bodyguard volunteers to go first, not hesitating to engage in a hand-to-hand fight with the monster, and quickly putting it into a martial arts technique, which sends the monster flying and then falling on its back, breaking the cervical bones, impressing our hero both by the speed and the precision of the ruthless woman. Next, it is Song's turn, who crushes the zombie's skull with her metal bat. Chen notices that the woman's strength is not enough because even though she knocked it down with one attack, it took her more than 10 to finish it. The next to defeat a zombie was Suk-sen, who took even longer to complete the same task, being reprimanded by the hero, who calls her weak for taking so long even though it is a monster with which she is familiar with the body structure. Now finally, it is Song-ji, the boss's daughter's turn. However, she gets so scared that she urinates on herself. She screams at her mother that she can't do it, trying to flee the situation. And given that the girl wet herself without even fighting, she fails the test. Faced with this shame, the protagonist calls Zixiang to discuss a matter with him. Getting closer, Chen explains that Lang Shuang went to several places where there were rumors of monsters, but nothing was found, which needs investigating. Now about her daughter, Song tries to defend her, but the hero explains that she is very bad, and at the moment there is no time to train her, so it will be up to the woman. However, his colleague comments that the virus has not been eliminated yet. In this case, Chen hands her a paper that will solve the problem. This paper contains the formula for the zombie virus serum in certain complicated stages. Faced with this, the protagonist says to just place the materials in the formula to generate it, as it is a precious potion formula. Thanking him for his trust, the woman says she will do her best to complete the task and keep the formula safe. Seeing this, Chen Bai tells her to do her job and asks someone to take her back, which she complies with. At this moment, the hero thought that his post must have been seen by many people, but he still did not know if anyone had contacted him. Upon looking at the notifications on his cell phone, the protagonist encounters very strange messages different from what he expected. However, among several useless messages, one of them caught Chen's attention. Someone claimed to be a pioneer and asked how the man knew about it, making our hero excited because not everyone was fooling around. Asking what the man's ability is, he replies having an S-level talent for mind control, making our hero quickly add him to the group. The name of this person, who has just joined groups 01 in the system, is Han Xiao. Connecting the dots with all the information given in the online chat, Chen Bai concludes that this pioneer from Shuchuan is someone well known, being none other than the high-level emperor known as Su Kyun. At 7:30 in the evening, Lu Lai answers a call where Song asks if she had made any progress in investigating the zombies, to which the journalist replied she had. It is discovered that the responsible parties are forces outside of Jiangsheng. They ordered everyone to collect zombies for a container near the dock. Lu Lai sent someone to get some information, and now it was time to meet the person, but he hadn't arrived yet. Then suddenly someone shouts saying that the wait is over. The dead zombies start falling from the sky as if they were disposable, and at the top of the place, a man the journalist wasn't expecting laughs, and also introduces himself to her, leaving her very scared for being discovered. At the Liu Huai mansion, he informs the protagonist that he has learned a lot from the group's documents, but his abilities have some issues he doesn't understand. In this case, Chen asks the boy to send it to him to look at coming across the ability in Wood Body, which according to this system is the path to immortality. This is an SS rank ability, however the cost to activate it is high. In this case, Liu must be wise to harm his foundations to increase his offensive power. After the conversation, Song arrives at the scene and our hero asks what is wrong. Unfortunately, she informs that the journalist found the zombies sent to the enemy container, but she was captured and now they want to negotiate. In this case, the protagonist asks if the kidnappers actually contacted the woman, because in that case, the journalist would have given up on her. And Song quickly kneeled in submission, explaining that Lu Lai would never betray them, as the problem surely lies with the people being investigated. In this case, the protagonist decides to save the girl, and Song thanks her master for his understanding. At the Manga container yard, the journalist participates in a forced romantic dinner with a mysterious man. While serving wine, he says the woman is being a bit ignorant as he hasn't even touched her out of respect for Zixiang. And if the boss accepts his conditions, Lu Lai will become his subordinate, but if not, then she will indeed become one of his toys. As he offers the drink, the man tells the woman not to disrespect his attitude. Suddenly, a voice resonates in the place saying that an undrunk toast along with a punishment wine doesn't seem tasty. While cutting a piece of meat calmly at a table nearby, the man reveals himself to be Chen Bai, who says that this is no fun and that perhaps the woman does not like to drink. and the kidnapper, for his part, only wonders when the protagonist had sat there. With a piece of meat on the fork, our hero asks if the journalist is hungry, saying he ate a piece of the steak and liked the taste. The kidnapper is amazed by the protagonist's audacity, who feeds the steak to the journalist, explaining that he is there to take her home. Initially, the man assumes that our hero was sent there by song, but understands that to have approached without being noticed, he must be a pioneer. After untying the woman, the protagonist tells the journalist to go to Zixiang, who is waiting for her in the car outside. Faced with this, the kidnapper understands that apparently Song is already under the invader's control, which turns out to be correct. In that case, the man stomps his foot and says that is interesting. It is indeed unlikely that the Queen of Jiangsheng would surrender so easily, so it is logical that the hero must have many interesting methods. Filling 2 glasses of wine, the man says they can prove ideas because he is very interested in these things and that they can work together. So the proposal to join the kidnapper and become the King of Jiangsheng is made to our hero, along with an invitation to make a toast. However, unexpectedly, the protagonist refuses the offer, leaving the man in such a state of shock that he ends up dropping the glasses on the floor. Regaining his composure, the boss of the place informs that he has an S-rank talent and threatens the hero, asking if he also wants to drink a punitive drink. Walking towards the kidnapper, Chen Bai says that before coming there, he found out that the man not only collects zombies, but also creates them from living people. In this case, having a powerful ability like his is detrimental and useless. Besides, helping the man is not worth the hero's effort, since he himself has an SSS rank ability. Laughing at the situation, the kidnapper informs that his talent is called Progressive Slaughter, receiving part of the attributes of anyone he permanently kills. This invincible high-level ability is only S-rank, and Chen Bai says he has an SSS rank 1, so the most likely scenario would be the hero becoming a god instantly. The protagonist, for his part, says that the kidnapper's deduction is close, but he will not explain while thinking about the enemy's ability. Calling the boy an arrogant child, the warehouse boss attacks our hero, saying he hopes to gain attributes with his death. Amid powerful attacks, an important fight begins with the protagonist managing to defend against the assault. Seeing this, the kidnapper releases more of his power, destroying his clothes and showing his muscular physique. With a charge from the protagonist that throws the man into the air, the battle continues. He, however, manages to recover and return to attack Chen with his fists, also managing to grab the hero's arm with his iron claws. Mockingly, the man asks if Chen Bai is okay, as he does not seem to have much strength left. Moreover, he questions if the hero is indeed someone with an SSS rank talent, telling him to stop hiding his power and show everything he has. But the protagonist informs him that he is already using his talent despite his enemy not having noticed. Irritated, the kidnapper decides to stop playing and reveals even more of his power, leaving Chen surprised. With a single attack, our hero is thrown against one of the containers in the place, breaking everything in his path. In his mind, the man thinks that both his speed and his psychic strength and agility are all greater than the protagonist, yet he still claims to be strong. With the tide of battle in his favor, he also says that the hero's tricks are nothing compared to his absolute power. However, suddenly, this game boss starts to feel the side effects of something that was planted in him minutes ago. The system then begins to warn him about the various negative effects he is experiencing at the moment, leaving him bewildered. Chen Bai, for his part, praises his enemy's physique, saying that is why it took a while for the virus to take effect. In this case, he asks how the man feels. Now lost in rage, he comes to attack Chen in his last resort with all his strength. However, now he is easily intercepted, having his chest pierced by the protagonist's right hand. In that case, he remembers being called sneaky and confirms being different from the others as he had warned. Turning the tables, Chen warns that he will absorb the man to gain some abilities, then tells him not to disappoint him. The system alerts that an evolved human has been absorbed and the Blacklight virus has completed its initial awakening stage, significantly increasing attributes. The Blacklight virus becomes the base attribute for the Monarch virus in the hero's body, and now the system says he can see some memory of his defeated enemy. This memory may bring the chance to steal an ability, and Chen realizes he has already gained 30% more strength, along with 20% more spirit and 100% more regeneration from the previous evolution. Moreover, the virus evolution also increased the skill status, with most statuses rising by 50 points and regeneration by 200. As if that were not enough, all elements increased by 20 points, and this was added to the protagonist's basic attributes. In this case, it is notable that Chen cannot play around for long, as normal people generally have attributes less than 5, which are already very fragile for him. With the enemy's defeat, our hero received equipment herbs and consumables, praising his luck, but still knowing that they are worse items than his own. The system reported obtaining a metal claw and a biological hazard disaster, which was a good sea-level item. In this case, it is confirmed that the kidnapper's luck was really good, but now all these items belong to Chen Bai. From the beginning until now, the protagonist's talent went from rank E to rank SSS, and the rumors of the 3 strange events were well rewarded. At the same time this happened, he managed to recruit Song Zixia, the future lord of Jiangsheng. Now waiting for Chen Bai outside her car, Song asks her master to get in. And he knows that with his current strength, it will not be worth going after the monsters that will appear randomly after the judgment arrives. So during these days until the event arrives, Chen decides he will just organize and prepare everything he will need for the post-apocalypse. Returning again to Song's house, the protagonist peers through the window while thinking about this planet's cruel fate. For the judgment will soon be cast upon them, but suddenly someone knocks on the door, interrupting his thoughts, so the hero tells whoever it is to come in. The guests turn out to be the girls from the group, and Song tells her master that fortunately they managed to complete everything that was asked on time. Lulei comments that the information about the terrain and the local population has been confirmed, so when the apocalypse arrives they will be able to clear everything and take control. Stuxin in turn says that the purchase of materials was also completed along with the compiled list that has already been sent to the hero. After Chen understands that everything is ready, Song warns that it is almost time and asks if they need to do anything else. So while looking at his phone, the protagonist replies that nothing else needs to be done, only putting all the information on the table. There are only 10 minutes left for the judgment to descend on Earth, so Chen informs the group not to get overconfident with their initial advantages given by the rare talents. During this time, many members were added to the hero's group who received the message and are anxious for the decisive moment informed by him. With only 3 minutes left, the group chat goes crazy with everyone unable to hold their anxiety anymore. In this case, the protagonist tells everyone to come to the window to get a closer look. For just 10 seconds, this quiet and peaceful scene will become a distant story. With only 6 seconds left, the world is heading towards its end. Song, for her part, says she is scared to the bodyguard and she asks the girl not to be afraid. Little by little, the countdown was approaching 0 and the tension in the place was clear. With only 2 seconds left, it was time to put Chen Bai's words to the test. Then on June 15 at midnight, the advent of the judgment descended on Earth. With the blue star of the apocalypse, the judgment officially began. Human survivors will soon become evolved, and these humans will gain innate abilities capable of increasing their levels by gaining experience. Other races that emerge as a result of the advent of the judgment will also be part of this race between life and death. Like a testing ground, the blue planet will become home to countless secrets and wild rifts. And whether this is dangerous or an opportunity will depend only on the person involved. Watching everything through the window, our hero hopes everyone tries their best to grow and evolve. Suddenly, the hard glass pendant on the hero's neck is recognized by the system and receives a bond. The protagonist does not understand how his item was recognized and decides to warn his colleagues to get out of there. However, looking at his group, the hero has a shocking revelation. At this moment, everyone was frozen, unable to move a single finger. Unexpectedly, this effect was not happening only inside the mansion. Realizing that outside, even the plane that was about to crash was stopped in midair. Logically, the protagonist thinks that the only thing that can be happening now is that time has indeed stopped. Unexpectedly, the hard glass pendant falls to the ground, giving way to an immense purple bright light that takes over everything around. This light gathers into one point heading towards the pendant centered on the hero's chest. The bonding of the hard glass then happens successfully, with a window in the system being released with many mysteries but informing the ability to turn back time. Stopping to think, Chen begins to understand that it seems he was reborn because of the hard glass and his status was save and read. From this, a powerful ability to return to previous conditions is developed. This makes our hero very happy, especially because the cooldown time is only 1 hour. After returning from frozen time, Song feels as if she has been called and asks if there are more orders for her. Saying she heard correctly, the protagonist tells her to go confirm the safety of the area as quickly as possible because the night is very dangerous. And promptly, they all understand his orders and quickly get to work. A new day dawns, and with it, the entire city was already in a state of true terror. Around the mansion, many zombies were chasing humans who were trying to defend themselves with modern weapons. From the top of the staircase, Song, who has now received her abilities, activates her amethyst eyes of S rank, thus going confidently into battle. The amethyst pupils can transform objects into amethyst or lights for offensive and defensive combat. Furthermore, the power increases with mental strength. After that, the woman activates crystal understanding, which can see the target's attributes and can change effect with the difference in mental strength between the two. This normal zombie has stats of 5 points or lower, and its weakness is in its head, thus having it sliced off by the woman's amethyst sword with ease. From the top of a building, the bodyguard lurks behind the monsters. She awakened an A-rank assassin ability having invisible and undetectable breath and receiving an increase in strength and sensitivity. Since her first attack has a 100% speed bonus, she easily defeats several of them in a single strike. Suddenly, one of the employees arrives in the mansion hall holding a survivor. Then Suxin, who awakened a B-rank healing ability, tells the man to give a zombie serum to the civilian who will soon be fine. Later at the location, our hero tells the journalist that things seem to be going well, and she replies that it is due to the preparation they had in advance, explaining that at the moment they have the entire territory and people at their disposal without any accidents having occurred so far. Understanding that everything is under control, the hero says he will let Lu Lai manage, informing her that he has something more important to do. Before the girl can even say goodbye, Chenbai disappears with a powerful leap that raises enough wind to even lift the girl's skirt. On the Jiangxing Mountain Road, the protagonist runs at high speed, remembering how bad it is that weapons and vehicles do not work in the early stages. However, with his current speed, it is likely that he can reach the desired location in time. On the first day of the apocalypse, Chen reveals having seen a sign that appeared in the air at Jiangxing University. It took a long time for him to understand the meaning behind it, but now is too late for regrets. Needing to seize the opportunity he has now. Back at the university, while looking for what he came for, the hero takes the time to absorb some zombies. Finally, in front of him was the sign that all evolved had always wanted to see. This sign indicates that an avatar of a god has descended to Earth, being very close to the hero, only a little further ahead. However, suddenly someone calls the evolved one's attention, asking for a moment. The being explains that there are not many people as strong as the protagonist in the early days of the Judgment, and introduces himself as a merchant. When asked if he would be interested in doing business with him, Chen says he would be honored to buy anything from the merchant. However, the being explains that it is only an exchange, there is nothing special to be honored about it. And Chen Bai explains that the honor is in hearing the merchant's name along with the presence of his symbol, also informing that he has been looking for him until now. A kind, fair, rich, and powerful being would be the perfect definition for the merchant. In this case, Chen introduces himself to the being with much respect and cordiality. For in front of him is the god of trade, the infamous Lord Lido. Feeling flattered by all the cordiality received, the merchant decides to give a first meeting gift to the hero. Lido informs that this is his gold membership card for the Goblin Chamber of Commerce, and if the card is used, it will be possible to get a 12% discount. Chen is very happy and thanks the man's kindness, while thinking that in his past life, when meeting the merchant, he was already immune to compliments. Changing the subject, Lido decides to show his product menu since the hero is there to buy, showing 2 S-rank items. Chen is surprised to see the Thunder Scroll from his past life, realizing that it was bought there along with many other precious items. Apologizing for the inconvenience, our hero asks for Lido's forgiveness, since even though he wants to buy the items, he still doesn't have enough money. But the merchant already knew that beginners wouldn't have much money on hand, so he told the hero to work hard and come back to buy from him in the future. The protagonist in turn questions Lord Lido, saying he heard that gods cannot participate in the judgment, directly needing to invest in someone first. In this case, he must be there looking for someone to invest in. Faced with this, the merchant is impressed with the hero's sagacity, praising him for knowing a lot and asking if he wants his investments. In light of this, Chen says that Lido has a great treasure that impresses even the gods, and that no evolved one could refuse. In this case, he asks for the investment. Sitting in a chair, the merchant states that his investments have to be profitable and something that the gods can covet, so he questions Chen's value. For even though the hero is his admirer, he will not make deals that bring him losses. And even though it is tempting, he is not planning to invest in someone so soon, but he decides to give the little boy a chance. Saying for him to be proud, because if the hero had not been gifted and already had the aura of another god, he would not be doing business. Getting excited, the protagonist asks if he can receive the precious investment now. However, Lido denies, explaining that talent does not represent the future, and among the gods there are those with a level lower than A. So to get the highest level of his investment, the hero will need to prove his worth by demonstrating his growth and real strength. Suddenly, a mission appears in the system explaining that the Lord of Trades has issued an SS rank mission for an ultimate investment. Quickly, without wasting time, our hero gladly accepts. Lido explains that when the mission is completed, the protagonist will be able to use this coin to summon his shadow, and hopes that he does not take too long. Holding the coin in his fingers, Chen says he hopes the merchant can show him in return the treasures that even the gods covet, to which Lido promptly agrees while summoning a dual profession scroll. This definitely catches our hero's interest. Having finished his work, the merchant stated that it was time to leave and wished him well, as today's harvest had been quite abundant. Opening the mission panel, the ultimate investment of SSS rank is confirmed as being the most valuable investment of the most intelligent of goblins. The mission tells the hero to find a copy of a secret kingdom in the university city and defeat the creature that the merchant is interested in, besides obtaining part of the creature's body and delivering it to the goblin. After that, the reward will be decided by Lido. The god's reputation was very good in his previous life. In this case, the hero having done a good job, he is sure he will not suffer any loss. However, it was hard to believe that his university really had a secret kingdom in a modern time like this. It must be well hidden. In this case, the protagonist wonders where he should start looking. In the gymnasium of Jiangxing University, many objects are placed against the exit gate. Inside the place, some survivors are taking refuge, and at the moment, a fight is happening. Some students fall to the ground beaten, and their colleagues try to help them, but the situation is already out of control. The aggressor reveals himself to be a muscular adult man who orders the student to take off his clothes and make an appeal to become his slave in a way that pleases him. And in case the young man refuses, the man states that he will kill him without mercy. The student's colleagues stand up hurt and furious, not willing to submit. But the aggressor reveals his talent, saying that if they choose to die, he will make their wishes come true, but he will make the death slow and painful. One of his partners grabs the aggressor's arm, telling him to stop because he was going too far. but he strikes the woman in the face, furious, pushing her away. At that moment, an explosion occurs, destroying the door blockade and surprising all the students. Our protagonist stares at the aggressor, asking if he had attacked the students. The aggressor replies yes, asking if he didn't like it, trying to provoke him. Upon hearing that, the protagonist fires at the aggressor with his transformed arm before landing a direct blow. The aggressor's partners try to attack the protagonist, which surprises the man's partner. That's because the protagonist simply grabs the other aggressor's head while asking if there was a medical student because he was looking for something. After releasing the aggressor, the students mention that none of them are medical students, until one of the students mentions that the adult aggressor's partner was in the medical departments. As the protagonist conjures a purple magic, the girl begs not to be killed, saying she hadn't done anything. She says she admires the Dragon Nation while admitting she has a promiscuous heart for not being able to speak Chinese properly. A man laughs while another girl just averts her gaze, understanding what she meant. The woman pleads, prompting one of the students to explain that the girl didn't hurt anyone and even tried to stop the aggressor. Kenbai mentions that while the students could go, the woman should stay. After that, he instructs the group to head to Jiangxing Dongshan Villa, asking them to mention his name so they can be helped. One of the students mentions that the school is full of zombies, while another asks if Dongshan is far from there. But Chenbai explains that he has already taken care of all the zombies along the way, and that they would have evolved after surviving. Our protagonist questions what the group would do when the monsters start multiplying. He warns that if they were afraid, it wouldn't last long, making all the students fall silent. Upon hearing that, one of the students thanks him and says they are leaving. At that moment, the woman asks if she can't leave with them, trying to understand why she had to stay behind. She believes the reason is that the students of the Dragon Kingdom love foreigners and asks not to be treated harshly during training. But Chenbai says she is mistaken, as he isn't interested in a promiscuous girl, reminding her he's looking for the medical department. The girl becomes embarrassed, saying she was so scared earlier that she didn't hear anything at the time, until she understands and tells him not to insult her. That's because the girl was pure, despite being willing to prove what she was saying. Kenbai simply accepts before they proceed to the university stadium. The girl says she's tired and asks if they can take a break, but the protagonist just refuses the request. With that, Chenbai touches her waist before running off, pulling her and causing her to drop her jacket. Upon arriving at the medical department building, she complains that being pushed so hard almost made her lose her jacket, having to hold it with her feet. But the protagonist asks if that was the research building, prompting her to explain that the research room was on the 3rd floor. She explains that the underground path led to Mr. Oshi's house and an incinerator, saying only he could know about the department. With that, the two arrive at the laboratory with test tubes filled with colorful liquids, which impresses Chenbai. Our protagonist analyzes the liquids on the table, recognizing that they were various different viruses. This analysis causes him to enhance the virus in his body so much that it allows him to unlock an ability with the influenza he had acquired, which excites the protagonist. Thus, Chenbai acquires the influenza ability, allowing him to infect targets and reduce their attributes. Upon analyzing the information about influenza, the protagonist realizes that the ability is incredible. This makes him realize that he hadn't paid proper attention to the talent tree because his SSS talent level was terrifying. Our protagonist remembers that the Goblin God's challenge would be difficult, imagining that he should take advantage of his points to further improve his skills. Kenbai continues walking through the laboratory while enhancing his skill tree and gaining some passives. To test what he had acquired, the protagonist punches a wall, destroying it and impressing the girl. She is frightened, thinking she was lucky Chenbai didn't use that blow earlier, while the protagonist understands how he could better use it. When the protagonist faces the frightened girl, he explains that there was nothing useful and asks to go to Ashi's house. As the path was very dark, the girl becomes scared until Chenbai tells her not to move because he felt something ahead. The two arrive at the incinerator room, making the protagonist open the doors, scaring her even more. Kenbai approaches the red circle and a message appears asking if he would like to enter the dungeon called Cold Incinerator. He confirms receiving a message that if the dungeon mission wasn't completed in 2 days, it would disappear. Upon entering the dungeon, he understands why he couldn't find this place before. At that moment, the beings lying on the bed start to rise, prompting Chenbai to prepare his possessed arm to attack. A multi-armed creature jumps at the protagonist while another falls to the ground. Kenbai gets ready to face the mutant zombies that were attacking him. The protagonist's strike finishes off the zombie, and he receives a message saying he earned 400 experience points for defeating the monster. At the same time, the multi-armed zombie begins charging an attack. The mutant creates a vortex of energy that almost hits the protagonist, who realizes why the monster kept its distance. But Chenbai uses the opportunity to launch himself forward, hitting the enemy against the ceiling, saying the monster's attack was too slow. Our protagonist charges power into his arm, landing a direct hit and smashing the zombie against the ceiling. Upon defeating this monster, he receives a message saying he defeated a level 7 splicer spider, gaining another 1,000 experience points. Kenbai gets excited, realizing that this dungeon was very special. He then faces the mutants ahead, telling them all to come at him together because the more, the better. Each one is defeated, yielding more and more experience points for the protagonist. At that moment, he receives a system alert saying he leveled up, gaining 2 more attribute points. Our protagonist speaks to the boss, saying he already got rid of his minions and asking if he should go help him show up. A powerful strike is unleashed, destroying the door and revealing a slime monster, making Chenbai feel a sense of danger. He realizes he must finish off this monster before it transforms. But his charge has no effect on the monster, which begins to grow, forcing the protagonist to use the power of the evolved flu virus. However, the monster is immune to the power, managing to land a hit on Chenbai. Our protagonist faces the mutant slime, realizing it was a biomaniac, as the monster stands upright. With that, the biomaniac lunges at the protagonist, trying to strike him while he takes the chance to counterattack. Even though the strike hits, the mutant had very rapid regeneration. This excites Chenbai even more, realizing that he could finally use all of his power since his rebirth. Chenbai believes he can use this biomaniac to recover some of his strength. After an hour of fighting, the mutant still manages to recover, making the protagonist suspect its regeneration might be infinite. After using an ability to read the monster's stats, the protagonist decides to see if his enemy is truly immortal. Another hour passes, and the mutant's regeneration slows down, leading Chenbai to believe the biomaniac's healing stops after a while. They fight for another hour until the monster can no longer maintain its form, leaving the protagonist unmotivated. After dragging it out for another hour, the mutant turns into a tiny form while Chenbai realizes it can no longer recover. Our protagonist mentions that even though he had fun with the fight, it was finally time to end it before stomping on the remains of the monster. After defeating the boss, Chenbai receives 10,000 experience points, leveling up again and completing the dungeon. This makes the dungeon become permanent with a cooldown period of 3 days, and a prompt appears asking if he would like to make a guide video on how to complete the dungeon. Chenbai reads the message about hiding his identity and setting a price, deciding to upload the video. Back in the Dongshin Villa area, a girl uses an ability to heal her partner sitting in a chair. The seated girl is impressed by what was said in the chat, talking about a white vault having released a guide video clearing the cold incinerator dungeon. With the video released, they decide to watch the video, along with many others. Another girl is impressed by the video, thinking she would need to slow it down to fully understand what happened. At the same time, a boy is thrilled by the protagonist's intense fight. Meanwhile, a man watching is outraged by the monster's regeneration being stronger than the protagonist's. Another girl, however, watches happily, seeing that Chenbai was completely healed. The number of viewers was so large that several comments about the video started popping up. Back in the dungeon, Chenbai was absorbing the remains of the monster. This ended up granting him 300 evolution points for the Blacklight virus for consuming a complex mutant. With that, the protagonist understands that the Blacklight virus has its own talent points. Even so, this excites him, and he evolves the virus, gaining a 300% increase in recovery speed and the passive ability cell regeneration. Chenbai gets excited when he sees the passive skills description, as it was an A-rank ability that allowed him to recover using his stamina. With that, he decided to check the items left by the boss of that nightmare-level dungeon after the fight. After analyzing the items, he notices that the scroll provided a great increase in strength at the cost of possible mutation or even unknown effects. Meanwhile, the genetic essence only increased physical condition, which he believed was much better, so he decided to use that item. Upon drinking the essence, Chenbai receives information that his physical attributes had improved. Lastly, he notices that the remaining item was a faceless skin that increased his resistance and could also improve his physique. The item's description confuses the protagonist, questioning whether it was a bodily change or an equipment item. Then he remembers that he had already acquired other monster items similar to that one. That's because some of those items included internal armor or even a skill book. But when he tries to use the book to acquire the cell activation ability, Chenbai discovers he cannot because he already has cell regeneration. Our protagonist realizes it was almost time to leave the dungeon, with only the task of delivering the monster's remains to Leto left. He wonders if the man who gave him his powers had expected the protagonist to complete the mission that quickly. However, when Chenbai intends to leave the dungeon, he gives up on the idea because he senses something is wrong with this whole story. Our protagonist recalls that Leto wasn't a traveler, so the divine avatar must have gone to him for a reason. Then he remembers that Leto had mentioned an unexpected bonus, making Chenbai realize that the real objective was the dungeon itself. This leads him to imagine that a divine avatar wouldn't go to that place without reason, wondering if he was overlooking something. At that moment, Chenbai realizes that if there was something he hadn't investigated yet, it would be inside the incinerator. Upon examining the area, the protagonist notices that the walls were dirty with oil and grease, saying there was nothing unusual about it. Then he notices the pipe rising through the incinerator and decides he should investigate it too. By jumping to climb the pipe, Chenbai realizes that it was much taller than the room's ceiling. In the end, he is surprised to see that the top was sealed off, making it a dead end. Our protagonist thinks that this couldn't be everything, wondering if there really was nothing there, until suddenly a ghostly figure appears in the pipe and attacks him. However, Chenbai simply retaliates with a direct punch to the ghost's face, Upon hitting the ghost, Chenbai receives a notification about the unknown mask responsible for the strange phenomena in the incinerator. At that moment, he realizes that it's an item, imagining that the question marks meant it was a divine item. Believing it to be the item Leto wanted him to obtain, Chenbai figures he must find a way to keep that mask with him. Back at the university, Chenbai manages to exit the dungeon portal, returning to the room where he had left the girl. She runs toward the protagonist excitedly, saying she had seen his video and fell in love with him. While the girl tries to explain that she had a really weak ability, Chenbai asks if she had copper coins. Then the protagonist remembers that the price to watch a video is 1 copper coin. Upon checking his earnings, he sees the numbers rising, imagining that it's still not enough to unlock storage. His desire is due to it being a system protected by the will of the universe, making the items completely undetectable. As the two of them leave, Chenbai says they should find a place to spend the night. She mentions that there were a few luxury hotels near the university, and since they were tall buildings, it would be safer. Chenbai agrees with the idea and asks her to point the direction. Then they arrive at the Love Couple Hotel, making the protagonist complain while the girl says he'd like seeing her in a nurse outfit. Then Chenbai says he actually liked the place despite not liking the outfit she was wearing. The girl changes into a police costume, twirling handcuffs, while the protagonist says she didn't have the spirit for it and told her to change again. Despite trying a teacher and student costume, Chenbai mentions that she didn't fit as a teacher and that it didn't make sense for a student to dress up as a student. After asking if she didn't have a more interesting costume, he finds a casual outfit that seemed to be getting him excited. Chenbai says that costume was good, mentioning that she would be his little pet for the night. After a lovely night with the girl, Chenbai sits on the bed trying to activate the storage function while she sleeps. Upon seeing the information, he stores the mysterious mask inside the storage space as he proceeds to the next part of his mission. Right after, he tosses a coin onto a magic mark, making his summoning for Leto. Chenbai remembers a phrase from his past life saying that when negotiating with Leto, emotions might be useful. But he also needs an item of value equivalent to the eyes of the goblin god, making the protagonist pull the monster remains from his pocket. Leto appears in front of him, impressed because it was so soon, asking if he had already completed the mission to prove his skills. Chenbai throws part of the creature's body, saying it was the proof he needed. The goblin god notes that the monster was dried out, saying it had been dead for some time. With that, Leto asks why Chenbai didn't summon him right after completing the mission. At that moment, Leto asks if he was trying to protect the scroll too much. But Chenbai says he didn't understand why the goblin god hid the dungeon's difficulty information when they respected each other so much. Our protagonist shows his irritation for realizing that the dungeon was nightmare level just before entering and that he could have died. Leto understands his frustration, saying that was part of the test and that he couldn't hand over the treasure to someone who couldn't handle the challenge. Chenbai remains serious, asking what the mission reward would be and what his next mission is. The goblin god admits he was wrong to withhold information, saying the protagonist had proven himself worthy. To make up for it, Leto decides to let Chenbai choose the mission reward and says the next one will be the last. Our protagonist greets his partner, thanking him for his generosity. With that, Leto asks him to choose his reward among max-level rank B items, revealing several blue cards. Chenbai chooses an item called Recovery Scroll, surprising the goblin god for having chosen a production-type item. Leto realizes that the protagonist had clear knowledge and objectives before giving him the final mission. But at that moment, Chenbai is surprised to find out the final mission would be to obtain 2 SSS-level profession scrolls. Our protagonist becomes quite worried, saying that would be very difficult since not even gods are born with professions at that level. With that, the goblin god smiles, saying his first profession was level A. But he explains that it was his greatest treasure because otherwise he would have had many more problems. Chenbai realizes he doesn't have many options and accepts the goblin god's mission. Elsewhere in the city, a giant rat monster was carrying a corpse. This monster was a level 5 mutant rat with many hidden details due to the level difference. A woman watching it praises that this monster had wiped out 2 teams, and her friend explains that it had attributes 4 times higher than theirs. The woman's partner observes the 2 survivors with them, telling them to keep an eye on the injured guy. But at that moment, the woman saves her partner because the mutant rat had discovered their hideout. This attack by the rat causes it to roll over the survivors while the woman tells her sister Zikyon to run. At that moment, the mutant rat charges at the 2, who try to prepare to fight back. But then a sphere of electricity appears above the rat's head, making the protagonist appear and land a direct hit. The woman becomes excited upon recognizing the protagonist, saying he managed to arrive just in time. With that, Chenbai tells Shuang to call the soldiers to clean the battlefield while Zikyong explains the situation to him. Upon returning to Zikyong's house, they explain that they were getting rid of zombies when the mutant rats appeared. Seeing the girl's condition, Chenbai tells her to take the opportunity to rest while he would take care of the remaining monsters. But Shuang says she couldn't do that because there would be no one to take care of him, saying she would recommend someone to help him. At that moment, she calls a girl named Lingyu to come in. Then the door opens, revealing the beautiful Qin Lingyu, whom Shuang says they rescued while cleaning the city. Our protagonist tells the others to leave, leaving only Qin Lingyu there. The girl becomes embarrassed, saying that if he needed anything, he just had to ask. Bai says he knows that in her profession she must have a sharp tongue, asking to give it a try. Kim Lin-yu smiles, accepting his request. Sometime later, the girl thanks him for the reward while Bai praises her technique. With that, the protagonist calls her to the window so he can explain the group's rule-setting requirements. But at that moment, Kim Lin-yu positions herself against the window, asking the protagonist to do something, which leaves Bai confused. The girl apologizes, saying her ability focus increases the sensitivity of her senses while blocking out external information. Bai explains that he called her to the window to show her the 3 areas of Dongshin. He presents the villa region, followed by the residential area and the nearby mountains, asking her to create rules for these regions according to their location. The girl accepts the master's request, asking if he had any other requests, making Bai say he was curious about her ability. Our protagonist mentions he would like to see how much her senses can be stimulated when she focuses on them. With that, the girl leans against the window again, saying she's ready before spending several minutes howling. The next day, in front of Asura exit, the protagonist group gathers with him, explaining that it's a nest of mutant rats. Bai warns that although he could take care of it himself, he wants to train strong and reliable men, which is why he wants to send them on this mission. His goal is for the group to evolve by facing the mutant rats to become the city's protectors. When his men kneel and accept the mission, Bai says it's weird having a bunch of men call him master, asking to be called Brother Bai. Everyone stands up, accepting the protagonist's request before he positions himself in front of the sewer grate. After destroying the grate, Bai mentions that the mission is starting. Our protagonist asks if the others also received the notification, and Zikyung responds that they did. She explains that the mission requires them to kill all the mutant rats and the Rat King, as well as investigate the origin of the mutations. Seeing how dark the place is, the protagonist partner is happy they brought torches, while he notes it's cleaner than he expected. Until suddenly, a shadow approaches, making Bai go on alert, telling everyone to be careful because enemies are incoming. Countless rats leap toward the group as the protagonist activates his mutant arm ability. The group organizes to face the rats, being careful with any that weren't completely dead yet. After the fight, one of the soldiers says he obtained rat skin gear while Shuang finishes disposing of the defeated rats. Zixiang mentions they already cleared 16 pipeline sections until one of the soldiers spots another enemy approaching, which excites Zixiang to take it down. Bai reminds his partner to activate her vision abilities before approaching the enemy. Then she uses the insight crystal to observe the enemy more clearly, recognizing it as a level 7 boss. This worries her because she can't identify its attributes, aside from its 30-point strength and 40-point agility. While she tries to continue the analysis, Bai charges at the boss, leaving Zixiang concerned. But the protagonist manages to finish off the monster with a single attack, earning an item called Plague Boots, which provided poison resistance. When the protagonist realizes it's a piece of equipment, he imagines the Rat King might drop a complete set. Upon equipping the boots, Bai mentions that even though it's a low-level item, it could be much stronger if he gets the full set. Noticing that they've already taken care of the Rat King, the protagonist says they only need to discover the cause of the mutations. After going through 5 pipelines without finding another rat, the protagonist tells them to wait because he sees something. Up ahead on the path, Bai notices a green mist full of plague as he walks through it, absorbing the various plagues in the air. He recognizes that although it's normal to absorb germs and viruses from the sewer, some of these didn't exist on Earth before the challenges and could affect evolvers. This makes him realize that the source of the mutation wasn't far from them, telling Zixiang to head back immediately. Our protagonist notices that with each step forward, the virus points increase faster and faster. As he perceives, the protagonist reaches the location, finding a skeletal-looking being holding a scroll. That being was a corpse trapped in a greenish web-like form, making Bai suspect that it was the source of the mutation and plague virus. After analyzing the virus concentration, the protagonist recognized that the source of the virus was the scroll in the corpse's hands. Bai takes the scroll, discovering that it had no instructions, containing only information about a plague cult. After absorbing the viruses in that location, the protagonist realizes he managed to surpass the limit of his strength. However, upon doing so, his arm begins to transform, which leaves him worried. At that moment, he receives information that the mission was completed, earning 2,000 experience points and receiving the item Wall of Flesh. With that resolved, he receives a plague seal, serving as proof of being a cult member, which can change depending on the distance from the source. He then receives an SSS level mission for not having been corrupted by the plague, which leaves Bai impressed. He realizes that the mission was related to the authority of a god, since gods have been sacrificed to the cult, and the goal was to find the plague bearer. This makes Bai understand that if he became a plague god, he might be able to face Helois, motivating him to complete the mission. At that moment, a purple portal appears in front of the protagonist, showing a dungeon being generated. As he reaches toward the portal, Bai discovers it's a hell-level dungeon called Plague Sewers. but since it would take a month to be generated, he would return in 1 month. Meanwhile, his partners were generating a portal to the Dongshin sewer area, with the recommended level of 1 to 10. With that, Chenbai returns, saying that the recommendation would be good for them to evolve. Seeing that the protagonist had returned, Zixiong mentions that she had sent a notice for people to enter in groups, and Chenbai praises her work. 20 minutes later, Chenbai gives instructions to his group, telling them to prioritize their lives over their evolution. After settling that, the protagonist gathers 3 girls to enter with him, saying he would only observe and do nothing unnecessary. Then Chenbai sends them a party invitation, surprising Zixiong by him being marked as number 001. Our protagonist explains that the number only shows the order in which people evolved and that they didn't need to be surprised. But at that moment, Songji questions why she didn't receive an invitation, making the protagonist explain that he hadn't invited her. He approaches her, saying that his harem was made only of capable and loyal girls, and that he wouldn't accept a scared little girl. Songji gets irritated, saying he was underestimating her because she had evolved during that time. To let her prove what she said, Chenbai tells her to grab her equipment and show how much she had improved. Upon entering the dungeon, the girl positions herself in front of the group, saying she could handle it alone while wielding her dagger. Then Chenbai mentions that he didn't know what Songji's or his other partner's abilities were. The partner explains that her ability is a B-rank talent called Illusion, which creates ghost-like forms based on her imagination. Meanwhile, Songji's ability was a C-rank talent called Natural Aptitude, which increases experience gain and proficiency rate by 50%. Chenbai realizes that Songji's ability isn't as useful in battle compared to her partner's. At that moment, the girl had finished off the mutant rats, emphasizing that they were more powerful than zombies. Our protagonist tries to provoke her, saying that Songji was trying too hard to be part of his harem and that he might make an exception. But as the girl says she only wanted to prove herself, Chenbai says he would respect her wish and wouldn't send an invitation. She gets embarrassed, asking if she really couldn't receive an invitation, and the protagonist says he won't send one. At that moment, her mother approaches, asking him to stop teasing her, as Songji was already upset about them introducing Qin Lingyu. With that, Chenbai approaches Songji, saying he would accept her request out of respect for her mother. Then a notification appears saying that Songji accepted the invitation and would join the palace of Emperor Bai. As she moves forward to kill the monsters, Chenbai mentions that she was a bipolar princess, and Zixian explains that she just talks too much. Her partner promises she would make her call him daddy, leaving the protagonist impressed by how bold she could be. She explains that since the world has changed, an innocent girl like Songji, who never suffered in life, could gain a lot with a daddy like him. The girl relaxes in the bathtub, saying she can live so comfortably thanks to the leader's guidance, until a system notification announces that the protagonist and his team are the first to complete the dungeon, showing a video. She widens her eyes, realizing the group leader cleared another dungeon. The woman mentions she has never seen a dungeon before while lamenting that 10 coins would ruin her financially. When she starts the video, she sees the leader with his group and wonders why there are so many women with him. At the same time, another man watches the video, thinking the girls aren't that good in combat and hoping to see Chenbai fight. Meanwhile, another viewer notices that the girls couldn't defeat the boss even under the protagonist's leadership. At that moment, another man watches the video, thinking the boss is about to appear and looks very strong. A viewer named Tom asks what the protagonist's power is, while his partner calms him down, saying he couldn't be better than the two of them. But Tom says that since Chenbai killed the boss with a single strike, he believes the protagonist is much stronger. Back to the woman, she recognizes that it was a level 10 boss while noting Chenbai's strength, and that the girl's combat methods were very useful. With that, she thinks that if she were in the leader's city, she would envy the girls being trained by him. At that moment, Chenbai tells Zixiong to gather her group and create rules for the settlement's economy and equipment trade. Then he presents some items, saying he still has a few things left. Chenbai believes she knows the importance of these items as Zixiong observes them carefully. Her partner mentions that one of the items, called Wall of Flesh and Blood, can be stronger than any barrier if used correctly. Another item allows them to take 10 seconds to return to the marked city, potentially making them the sole rulers of Jiangcheng. As for the last item, Zixiong mentions it improves the appearance of the body and can be transformed into any appearance. That line makes him think the last item is the least important compared to the other two. Her partner questions how that can be, reminding him that he is the true owner of all of it, and that the equipment that pleases him is the most important thing of all. Our protagonist says he doesn't understand much about women's clothing, asking if she could surprise him, and she replies that surprises wouldn't only come from her. Zixiong remembers that she promised to make Songji call him daddy, and so she's going to dress her up now. Back in Zixiong's room, the protagonist carries one of his girls asleep dressed in a captural outfit, as he lays her on the bed beside several other sleeping women. After putting on his plague cloak, Chenbai remembers that today the dungeon would drop part of the plague set after 3 attempts. Our protagonist imagines that if he gets one piece of the set every 3 attempts, he will complete the set in 3 days. At that moment, a system alert appears informing that someone named Dreamy has started a private chat with him. Dreamy asks the protagonist for help, saying she's not good at fighting, and Chen-bai explains that he would need to know the details of her abilities. Our protagonist adds that even though listing the attributes might help, it still wouldn't be enough. With that, Dreamy decides that if he needs the details of her talents, then she can provide them right away. Chen-bai thinks that even though he's never heard of anyone named Dreamy in his past life, she might be good, until he sees her ability called Dream Butterfly, which leaves him impressed. That's because it's an SSS level talent with infinite growth, realizing there's no way such power could be unknown. Our protagonist mentions that SSS level talents are complicated, asking if she can explain the effects of her talents and abilities. Dreamy explains that it's an ability to enter the dream world and can also be used to enter the dreams of others. She mentions that to weave the dreams, everything needs to be arranged through an invitation, generating a dream totem. Chen-bai notes that her power is practically invincible as long as no one finds her real body. The girl says she can send a dream totem in image form to guide him in the dream world. But the protagonist disagrees, saying he has no protection inside her dreams. Then Dreamy offers an evolution contract promising not to harm him. Upon hearing the contract's value, Chen-bai asks why she needs combat advice so badly. Dreamy explains that monsters killed in the dream world die in real life, yielding enough gold coins along with other rewards. One of them would be the spiritual perception ability, which Chen-bai notes is powerful, and the other would be the special grade F item, City Construction Order. With that, Dreamy mentions that although she is strong in dreams, she is weak in the real world, believing that if she doesn't improve, she might die soon. Chen-bai imagines that her abilities lack physical enhancements, which is an incredible weakness. So he asks her to send the evolution contract since she was willing to sign it, he would help. When Dreamy sends a contract, the protagonist simply accepts it. Back at Zixiang's house, Chen-bai lies on the bed, hearing a voice say that the dream totem needs him to relax. Our protagonist imagines that this ability is terrifying for evolving to the point where it can be seen and dreamt. After falling asleep, Chen-bai finds himself in a different room, face to face with Dreamy. The girl introduces herself again as Meng, saying she just signed a contract with him. Chen-bai introduces himself, asking if that was her dream world, since that place didn't seem suitable for combat training. But Meng says it wouldn't be there. Then she points to a glowing portal, saying she cleaned up an academy not far from there. Our protagonist looks impressed by the city before him filled with glowing butterflies. He asks if that's the academy, noting that her dream world is very large. Meng explains that although the dream world doesn't belong to her, she can enter and modify it because she is a dream traveler. Upon understanding everything, Chen-bai suggests they go to the academy to begin training. The girl agrees as she crosses the glowing portal of pink butterflies. When they arrive at basketball court, she recites, Meng says let there be light, while snapping her fingers. With that, the gym lights up, revealing the empty bleachers. Chen-bai says she looked like a schoolgirl now, making the girl mention that before the apocalypse, she was a novelist. Our protagonist explains that to strengthen her abilities, she should fight without her dream abilities because he wants to see her current level. Meng explains that in the dream world, her stats increase to match her mental strength, which is 48, telling him to be careful. But he tells her not to worry and to attack with full strength. When she charges at the protagonist, he simply dodges, saying her weight is unbalanced, leaving her unable to attack or retreat. This embarrasses her so much that she starts flailing her arms, trying to hit him. At that moment, the protagonist asks if that was the turtle punch from Kitty Martial Arts, which also fails, prompting him to tell Meng to control her balance as a punch that can't be recovered from is the weakest of all. His second lesson is that she needs to aim properly and expose where she wants to hit instead of striking randomly. Chen-bai continues with the third lesson, saying Meng needs to observe her opponent instead of obsessing over her own attack. With that resolve, the protagonist says he understands Meng's level, asking her to remember those 3 points. Then he says that because her punch speed is around 20, she couldn't deal with it, making her apologize for not being good at it. But the protagonist says she doesn't need to apologize and should just train hard. Meng smiles, saying she'll work hard, blushing slightly. After 7 days back at Zixiang's house in Dongshan, she reports that all the laws have been posted and there are people explaining them on billboards, making Chen-bai believe the Dongshan area is on the right track. Our protagonist says he's been cleaning up the Dongshan area these past few days. Chen-bai says she will manage the place because he has to leave early the next day and Zixiang thought he'd stay a bit longer. But he mentions that he doesn't have time to wait for a rank E group, saying there are many opportunities and precious treasures out there he needs to get. Zixiang asks him to think about them and come back soon because if the palace of Emperor Bai is flooded, no one will be able to control it. Then he asks Zixiang to call the others so they can have a good discussion on how to solve that. The next day, after spending the night satisfying his entire harem, he watches them before leaving. At that moment, he meets Shuang walking through the hallways of the house. Chen-bai asks if she was looking for Kyung's clothes and she replies that she was actually looking for him. Shuang mentions there were people causing trouble, making the protagonist ask if the Dongshan rules hadn't already been posted. The girl explains that although they've already controlled the situation, one of them claimed to be his classmate. With that, Chen-bai orders them to take him there, accompanied by Shuang. In the Dongshan village area, a man points upward upon recognizing the protagonist while guards with shields are positioned nearby. Shuan explains that they are dissatisfied with the daily fee of 1 copper coin because they want security and stability for free. The boy introduces himself as Li Chen, and the protagonist says he knows who he is. But Chen Bai explains that the rules are not harsh, as killing 1 zombie already earns a copper coin, not to mention the jobs for those who can't fight. With the crowd gathered, Li Chen says it's not about how much money they have, as in this situation, they must help each other. He mentions being the student council president, stating that canceling the rules would be in everyone's best interest. However, Chen Bai says he doesn't want to waste time with someone like him. Then the protagonist announces that those are the rules there, and anyone who doesn't accept them can leave now, because anyone still there in 3 minutes would be killed without mercy. Chen Bai tells his partner to start the countdown, and she confirms. The student council president says he doesn't need 3 minutes because he won't leave, explaining that he intended to save money so everyone would support him. One of the guards tells him to stop talking nonsense, as 1 copper coin is not a burden to anyone. The guards then surround him, mentioning that if he can't earn 1 copper coin, he might as well go home and be a guard dog. Li Chen gets angry with the soldiers, saying he is leaving while warning the protagonist that he will regret expelling him. At that moment, Chen Bai yells for them to wait, making the student council president believe he had changed his mind. Our protagonist strikes his former colleague with a precise blow, scaring his partners, who back away in panic. Chen Bai says that anyone who holds a grudge against him and brags about it will regret it. Shuang warns that only 1 minute remains and asks if they are not going to leave. One of the colleagues drops to his knees, saying he is ready to follow the rules of the place and accept the consequences for the trouble caused. Chen Bai says he is a smart man, promising everything will return to normal after a month in exchange for 5 copper coins. The group says they are prepared, while the protagonist says the rest is up to Shuang. At that moment, the protagonist notices that Meng Meng has sent a message. She says it's been hard to improve her skills and asks where Chen Bai lives so she can visit him, saying she lives in Wucheng. Our protagonist mentions that he could go meet her while remembering that in his past life, he received an S-level mission in Wucheng. Chen Bai believes he could use that place as a capital to trade materials or information he needs. He decides he should go to Wucheng first. Meanwhile, a man asks his brother how much food they have, and his brother replies they only have enough for 3 days with 10 people. The boy Jiang Luping gets angry, believing it's because of a special zombie that killed 5 of his men effortlessly. At that moment, a red monster roams the streets, while the leader notes that once they reach the 10th floor, the monster would become aware of them. His partner Song Ji realizes that they are trapped there, leaving them worried. Then a girl points to something and shouts for the others to look over there. The group looks out the window, seeing something falling from the sky, wondering what it was since they couldn't clearly see what it was. They wondered if it was also a new type of zombie. Upon seeing the monster jumping on the walls, Jiang Luping orders them to close the curtains until his partner notices that it might be a human. Song Ji asks how it would be possible for that guy to be human, while the leader questions if he saw it wrong. The girl Wei Shiyu mentions that he shouldn't forget about her abilities, while her friend Zhang Yishui watches the situation closely, until she realizes that the guy is approaching the monster, which catches its attention. It turns out to be Chen Bai, realizing that it was a tyrant, which would help since he had a weapon project that required a tyrant's bone. Our protagonist knows he shouldn't use the giant hammer, as that would affect the chances of receiving the tyrant's bone. He then prepares his shadowy hand, believing it would be better to decapitate the monster. Song Ji says he can't see clearly, while Zhang Yishui warns that maybe it's better not to look, as it could be extremely dangerous. His partner explains that the guy's hand turned into claws, making Jiang Luping think he was a monster, until Wei Shihu mentions that the monster was dead, realizing that the protagonist was absorbing the tyrant. At that moment, she says she managed to see his face, while Chen Bai receives a system notification about experience points and special abilities. When testing his new abilities, he realizes he has acquired a form of shield. Our protagonist notices that unlike other forms that affect body shape, the shield grants nearly double his base strength. Song Jie recognizes that it was Chen Bai, getting excited to see him, which makes the protagonist curious. Chen Bai climbs the building, reaching the window and seeing that the girl was Song Ji's close friend. Wei Shiyu asks him if her friend is okay. After entering the room, he talks about his Dongshan settlement with Zijiang and Shuang taking care of the place. The group wonders if he's joking because they can't imagine the Queen of Jiangsheng is helping him manage all of that. But the protagonist states that he wouldn't lie about something so easy to verify. At that moment, Krijeng appears at the door calling for Chen Bai, surprising him. Then 2 of his classmates show up, saying they heard someone calling his name. Chen Bai asks what everyone is doing there, showing surprise at their presence in that place. Kunizheng explains that on the day everything happened, Jiang Luping brought a group of students to help Wei Shiyu at the store where she worked. Xiao Mu mentions that although they tried to find out if he was available, Lai Feng said he was probably busy. Realizing there were many university classmates around, Chen Bai invites them to go to his settlement in Dongshan. But he explains that there's a rule requiring the payment of 1 copper coin per day, asking if they can manage, and the group replies that they can. The leader explains that if that monster hadn't trapped them there, they might have found gold coins. Our protagonist says that although he can't go with them, he only saw one tyrant, implying that it's not that common. Kenbai pulls out some floating blue cards, showing a few low-level items he doesn't need. After that, he says he'll leave first because he's in a hurry, leaving the location of his settlement. The group says goodbye to the protagonist, who continues on his way. As he heads to Meng Meng's house, she starts a private chat again. She says that King Hanwang was in the group, making her believe that her new ability could help him. Kenbai wonders if the identity of King Hanwang is Han Xiao. Back at the hotel, one of the men suggests going to the settlement, while Jiang Luping says a place with evolved individuals is crucial for them. But he mentions that they should prepare well because traveling from Jiangsheng to Dongshin is almost like a journey between cities. Li Feng asks for a moment because he just thought of something. However, Chen Bai returns to the hotel room, prompting Wai Shiyu to ask why. She asks if something is wrong, and Chen Bai replies yes, because he needs a room to deal with something. Zhao Mu smiles and invites the protagonist to his room. Ken Bai says he needs to be alone while his classmates say he can stay in the room and they'll keep watch from the living room. Seeing this, Wei Shiyu asks him to wait a moment. That's because she remembered to ask for Sonji's identification number since she wants to add her, and Chen Bai replies that it's 990,225. Qizheng asks what the protagonist's number is, and he replies that it's 001. He falls silent, staring at the protagonist while waiting for a response, until he starts laughing, saying that even though he became an evolver, the protagonist's dry humor hasn't evolved at all. But then Zhao Mu says he'll understand once he adds him. Realizing it wasn't a joke, Qizheng is surprised while Chen Bai tells him not to stand there and to hurry up and catch up with him. 10 minutes pass until one of them comments that Chen Bai's number is really impressive. Zhao Mu asks if his friend remembers that Chen Bai asked if there was any news about the physical test date around June, and he replies that he does. Then Qizheng asks if Chen Bai already knew about the end times back then. His friend says that although it might be just a coincidence, they benefited from the exercise. Qizheng mentions that they really benefited from the information Chen Bai provided, and his friend agrees. At that moment, he turns to Wai Shiyu, wondering why her face is so red as she holds a tablet. The girl says it's nothing as she heads back to her room, reminding the group of Chen Bai's instructions not to enter his room. Wei Shiyu stops just after crossing the door because she's worried about the protagonist. She sends a message to Sonji saying that Chen Bai was getting into trouble, making her friend say she wouldn't be the only one calling him dad. This conversation makes Wei Shiyu blush, wondering what she could have meant by that. Then she starts imagining herself with the protagonist and the other girls, blushing even more, until someone tells Jiang Luping that the matter isn't so simple, leaving Wei Shiyu confused. Li Feng says the protagonist was lying because there are many loopholes in what he said, while his partner agrees, saying everything seemed a bit fake. He believes it doesn't make sense to imagine Zixiang helping him manage his settlement. This ends up making Wai Shiyu worried about the protagonist because of what she hears. Meanwhile, Chen Bai appears in a dreamlike space in front of butterfly wings, saying he was a little late. But he quickly cheers up, realizing he was the only one missing, as there was a group gathered in the room watching him. One of them introduces himself as Han Xiao, saying he finally met the protagonist, and that he's even more handsome than he imagined. Meng Meng says he knows how to flatter, making him embarrassed as he tries to say he wasn't flattering. Another member named Crow explains that Meng Meng invited him to complete the team, and that his talent is SS level fear embodiment. That makes Han Xiao feel bad because his mind control ability is the weakest, being only S level. Our protagonist mentions that even though their talents are weak, their luck isn't bad. He says that if they had encountered this situation earlier, Meng Meng wouldn't have been able to help. That's because the ability to bring everyone into someone's home using the dream totem as a core is something she learned the day before. Han Xiao laughs, saying he's always been very lucky and seems pretty relaxed. However, since Meng Meng doesn't have much time to keep the four of them in the dream world, Chen Bai asks them to explain the situation quickly. At that moment, Han Xiao says there's a dungeon with a specific mission for him, and that he'll send the mission info. The information talks about an S-rank family mystery involving a medical record of an unknown aunt in a psychiatric hospital. The group arrives at the Red Star Psychiatric Hospital, and the telepath comments that when he found it, it had already turned into a dungeon. Han Xiao mentions that although he entered once, he gave up quickly. That's because the monsters were too much for him, and he could only wait to return later, as he was warned someone had noticed his presence. Our protagonist says he understands what happened as he extends his hand so they can open the portal. An option appears asking if he wants to lead the team to the Red Star Psychiatric Hospital. Ken Bai accepts to lead the team, entering the dungeon within the dream space. Crow notices there's a small monster nearby, while Han Xiao says the monsters at the start of the dungeon aren't weak. At that moment, a nurse monster appears in front of them. Crow steps forward, saying he'll test the creature's strength. The nurse charges at them, targeting Crow, but she ends up stopping, intimidated by the fear embodiment ability. The nurse falls backward, frightened, staring at the being created by Crow's ability. Then he activates the illegal burst mode in his ability, making her scream in pain as her heart explodes. Meng Meng says that looked like a villain, while Hanshio comments on how powerful that ability was. After defeating the nurse monster, Crow mentions that they got lucky because they obtained a skill item. Even though Chenbai lets Hanshio and Meng decide who should keep the item, Hanshio says he doesn't need it since he wants the items for his exclusive mission. With that, the Dream Traveler thanks them and receives the ability Sharp Thought Burst. Chenbai asks Meng to use the ability, and she explains that although the damage isn't high, the sound's range could attract monsters. But the protagonist explains that's exactly what they need since searching room by room is too troublesome. She uses the ability, creating a pink energy wave that hits the building's floors, attracting the attention of nearby monsters. Our protagonist acknowledges that the monster attraction effect is really good. Hanshio realizes there are a lot of monsters in the area, getting a bit worried about the situation. Crow warns everyone to be careful and not get distracted, since they were starting to be surrounded by monsters. Meng becomes worried about the number of monsters, asking if they'll be able to handle so many. Chenbai firmly replies that there's no problem, saying it's a great chance to test their newly improved abilities. The telepath gets excited by Chenbai's comment, activating his ability and preparing for the attack. He throws his knives at the monsters in front of him, taking out several at once. Crow activates his ability again, creating a massive shadow to strangle the monsters ahead. At the same time, Meng creates a weapon that causes a huge explosion in front of her to eliminate the monsters. She looks at the destruction with a smile on her face, saying it feels good and she wants to do it again. Hanshio believes the ability to create things in dreams is very strong, wondering if she'll be able to build a Gundam in the future, and his teammate says yes. Crow turns to Chenbai, asking why he hasn't acted yet. Our protagonist realizes the energy has finally reached its limit, thinking it's hard to charge it during battle. Then he activates his Earth Spikes ability, hitting all the monsters in front of him with spikes emerging from the ground. His team is impressed by the destruction, as he manages to create a huge path of giant spikes, killing all the enemies. Then two nurse monsters appear behind him, and Hanshio notices, using his ability to save the protagonist. But Chenbai explains that he left the two nurse mini-bosses on purpose while holding his energy knives. This leaves Hanshio quite startled by the leader's power level, while Crow tries to comfort him. Chenbai realizes he hasn't used the evolved memory reading ability, which allows him to see the devoured target's memories and gain abilities. So he takes the opportunity to absorb the abilities of the nurse monsters. Then he visualizes a crucified woman with a pentagram drawn on her body, screaming. Another woman named Kang crawls on the floor, begging them to stop while a doctor watches her, asking her to calm down. The doctor says he planned to offer her to the master, lamenting that a mad woman can only serve as a sacrifice. Another nurse tells her colleague Wang not to be sad, as everyone is avoiding her because of Kang's situation. Wang sees Kang lying down, thinking she was a good and beautiful person, wondering how she got so bad so suddenly. At that moment, the word 16 appears, making Chenbai recall the demon formation. Chenbai remembers hearing about a mental hospital where demons could be summoned until its level exceeded the dungeon's limit at the time. He tells them to be careful and not to spread out as they prepare to investigate the psychiatric hospital. That's because he believes there might be very powerful creatures in there. After half an hour of searching, Hanshio mentions they didn't find anything, and Crow says the number 16 keeps appearing frequently. But the protagonist ignores the number 16, wondering why the boss hasn't moved yet, making Crow ask if he's scared. Then a dark aura emerges with a voice saying he's too arrogant. The group prepares for battle as Chenbai tells the being to come out of hiding. From within the shadows, monstrous feet with sharp claws appear. This being reveals himself as the director of the hospital, saying he is also the 16th demon of the 72 Pillars of Solomon, named Ji. Hanshio recognizes the creature as a demon, while Crow questions if it's an envoy of the demon god. He says pretending to be calm is useless because they will be a sacrifice for his master, and that if the girl is willing to serve him, she could bear his offspring. Ji mentions that if she accepts, he might spare her life. Meng gets angry and tells him to bear the children himself for his master. Chenbai says that for a low-level demon transformed from a human, he's quite arrogant. He tells Ji to show his power if he has the guts and to stop talking nonsense just to make them laugh. The demon gets furious, saying he'll show them how high this guy really is before asking his master to grant him more power. An intense demonic aura emerges, affecting Hanshio and Crow, who begin to feel a horrible sensation. Meng is also affected by Ji's powers as she tries to ask Chenbai for help. Our protagonist recognizes that this is the type of demon he hates most, one that can affect people's minds, which can be a disadvantage. Then he realizes he needs to deal with this quickly and charges at his enemy. Although he manages to land a direct hit on the demon's belly, it doesn't seem to have much effect, and the demon praises Chenbai for the strike. Right after, he nearly engulfs the protagonist in flames, forcing him to use his shield to get away from the enemy. Ji acknowledges Chenbai's strength for resisting his attacks so well, but he warns that the protagonist wouldn't be able to withstand his black flames, and the consequence of retreating would be becoming the target of his mental attack. At that moment, the demon commands the protagonist to writhe in pain while showing despair of the brink of death, until Hanshio manages to break the effects of the enemy's mental pressure, making the Dream Traveler complain that he should have done it earlier. But the telepath says he didn't fully understand what was happening and only realized they could resist the mental pressure later. Then G recognizes his name, realizing he is a descendant of the Han family, a member of his master's bloodline. Still, the demon notes that even if they can resist mental pressure, they are still vulnerable to the black flames. Han Xiao decides to provoke him, asking how he could still be trying to kill a descendant of his master, saying that could anger him. G recalls that the telepath is a descendant of someone who planned to betray his master, and thus killing him could earn him a reward. At that moment, he begins to draw an heir, planning to incinerate them all together. Crow realizes they can't let him use his flames and tells everyone to charge in. Then G ends up sneezing and interrupts his attack, leaving Crow and Han Xiao confused. But Chen Bai says the effect took a little longer than expected, mentioning that he had a good physique for a low-level demon. G asks what the protagonist did to him, and Chen Bai explains that he used an ability that causes the enemy to sneeze non-stop. At the moment, the ability was called Influenza, lung infection, which could take about 10 seconds to lower the target's stats. The demon gets furious, asking how he could have gotten sick, while the second part of the effect begins, making it hard for him to breathe. Until finally, with the third part of the effect, he completely loses the ability to breathe, starting to agonize. Ken Bai mentions that it worked because even demons need to breathe, and it was worth the points spent on that ability. After defeating the monster, he receives 30,000 experience points for his contribution in the battle against the infernal apostle Zhao Changlin. When he turns to his group, everyone is trembling in fear because of his ability, with the dream traveler saying she didn't want to catch a cold. But Chen Bai reassures them, saying they won't be affected by his virus unless they are a target. Meng Meng mentions that the protagonist's abilities are unbeatable, while he says it only worked because it was a low-level demon. After mentioning he received the dungeon clear notification and could now upload the video, Chen Bai asks how Han Xiao's mission status is, but he says it still doesn't show as complete, realizing there must still be a clue about the mission inside the dungeon. Then Chen Bai asks if the group wants their faces to appear so they can become famous, but everyone asks to hide their faces, while the telepath says they need to move quickly to find the mission clues. After sending the video, his teammates receive the notification, excited to watch it. Zhang Luping's group ends up watching the video, recognizing that the guy was Chen Bai. Wei Shiyu starts teasing her teammates, asking if they weren't the ones saying the protagonist was just a fraud. Li Feng asks if he wasn't at the hotel, reminding them that even if he proves his abilities, there's still no proof about his settlement. The leader grows even more worried about Chen Bai, imagining that he's manipulating people to take advantage of them. But that ends up irritating Wei Shiyu, who acknowledges his bad relationship with Lei Feng while questioning Zhang Luping's judgment. Then she asks them to watch a video she had sent them. In the video, a monster with multiple mouths can be seen, and Wei Shiyu mentions she received it from Song Ji and asked them to watch it together. It turns out that this monster was a wall of flesh that feeds on monsters, used by Song Ji to protect the settlement. Soon after, Song Ji shows the rest of the mountain with her settlement, mentioning that since it's expensive to record video, she could only afford 10 minutes. With that, she continues showing areas of the settlement while explaining that anyone can go there as long as they don't cause trouble. She also shows that they plan to expand the areas to create more entertainment zones. Songji also shows her residence, mentioning that it's a secure place because not everyone can end up going there. She further explains to Wei Shiyu that even though the protagonist didn't call her, it would happen eventually because he's a massive pervert. But she already mentions that she needs to log off because she has to go train in a dungeon and still has a lot to talk about with her friend. With that comment, Zhuang Yixi asks if she has ever questioned Songji how many women the protagonist has, which leaves her friend embarrassed. At that moment, Wei Shiyu realizes she should have watched the video before asking everyone to watch it together. Li Feng admits that he was wrong, while Jiang Luping panics, saying she couldn't become one of Chen Bai's girls. But she asks when she ever said she wanted to be the protagonist woman, giving him an irritated look. Jiang Luping mentions that Chen Bai is a womanizer and full of girls, while he just wanted to be with Wei Shiyu. But she tells him to stay away, reminding him that no matter how much he loves her, she had already rejected him several times before the apocalypse. With that, Wei Shiyu takes the opportunity to reject him again, saying she feels nothing for him. Meanwhile, in the dream space, Chen Bai is absorbing the demon's body when he receives some information. Then the protagonist decides to expel the demon's blood, acquiring the Hellfire ability along with more evolution points. In addition, he receives the expelled blood from the demon, which becomes an item. Ken Bai wonders about the blood factor, realizing that by forcing it to be expelled, it becomes an item instead of disappearing. After that, he returns to the group asking if the boss had left anything interesting behind. Han Xiao mentions that he only dropped an A-rank professional scroll of the Hell Messenger and another A-rank scroll of Infernal Black Flames. Meng Meng says there was also a blueprint for D-rank armor. Upon analyzing the blueprint, he realizes one of the required items would be horns from a pureblood demon and decides to keep it while dividing up the items. Everyone thanks the protagonist for his help, leaving only the matter of helping Han Xiao complete his mission. They reach the director's office, where Han Xiao imagines he might finally find the clues to his mission. But when he tries to open the door, a huge demon appears in front of him. It turns out that this demon was only a statue of the 16th demon of the 72 demons of Solomon called Ji-Pei. Meng recognizes its intense aura, and Chen Bai explains that Ji-Pei somehow has access to that statue. Then we see the story that around 100 years ago, a woman from the Han family fell in love with Ji-Pei's avatar. Since then, every generation of the Han family would have a pair of twins, where the girl would become a new wife for Ji-Pei, while the boy would remain unaware of the story and be able to live a normal life. Meng continues reading the story, seeing that Han Xiao's father discovered the curse and tried to protect his daughter from being locked in the hospital. His decision was to end the life of his newborn daughter, which shocks the telepath. However, Zhao Changlin found out about his plan in time to prevent him from killing the girl, calling him a traitor and killing him. After that, Han Xiao's sister was taken away from that place, while Zhao Changlin received demon blood as a reward. But Meng mentions a few more things she found in the doctor's journal, which she managed to read before she couldn't take any more. The telepath explains that he managed to complete the mission after she read the journal, saying that long paragraphs give him headaches. Meanwhile, Chen Bai keeps observing the statue, making the dream traveler ask if there was something wrong with it. Our protagonist moves one of the statue's horns, revealing a secret passage from that room. The group is confused about what that passage could be, while the protagonist looks very excited. After a while descending the staircase revealed by the passage, Han Xiao mentions they must be at least 2 to 3 floors underground. Chen Bai explains they were getting close to the objective, which he already had a good idea about. In this case, it would be a summoning room or a place to communicate with Ji-Pei. Then they arrive in a room full of inverted crucifixes around a magic circle. Crow recognizes the strong smell of blood, while Meng asks what the protagonists have found. Chen Bai shows them the item, which turns out to be a core of the Hell Teleportation formation that requires 16 sacrifices to be used. They realize it could be used to summon a demon, and that the dungeon's difficulty level would increase because of it. The group understands that if they manage to summon the demon and kill it, they could receive a good reward. But when he mentions that they are currently level 8 and the demon would appear at level 12, everyone starts to lose enthusiasm for the idea. Our protagonist also mentions that if he summoned the demon, everyone would die because they weren't at least level 10. Han Xiao still tries to convince him to fight the demon, but Chen Bai warns that even he wouldn't be a match for the enemy, promising to come back later. Crow asks Meng to invite him again next time, and she says she will give him priority. As they prepare to leave the dungeon, Han Xiao asks if the story about his sister didn't emerge because of the apocalypse. Chen Bai asks if Han Xiao has any memories of his father before that, and he replies no, because they weren't close. The telepath says the strangest part was that he turned into a different kind of zombie during the apocalypse, which excites Crow at the idea of a demon zombie. But Han Xiao explains that he was more like a plague covered in spots, which triggered his powers to protect himself. Our protagonist is confused about the spots, and the telepath explains it could have been due to his factory job since his co-workers had them too. That makes Chen Bai very curious about the place, asking to take a look when he goes to Shanghai. Crow decides to ask something to Chen Bai, who mentions that now is the best time to bring up doubts or information. Returning to the real world, Chen Bai notices his teammates scattered around the room, writhing in pain. As the protagonist tends to his friends, he explains that he was releasing a lot of poison to protect himself. When he solves the problem with his teammates, only Jiang Luping is left. But Wei Shiyu explains that he had tried to kill the protagonist, leaving him confused about what happened. Then Wei Shiyu explains that since he and Li Feng were doubting the settlement story, she asked Songji to send them a video. After explaining Jiang Luping's reaction, she mentions that the leader freaked out, blaming Chen Bai for what happened. The problem is that Wei Shiyu always had to deal with him threatening anyone who got close to her. Her only protection was Songji, who stopped him from throwing himself at her like he did with the other girls. However, after the apocalypse, she got stuck in the hotel with him, only managing to stay safe because his power wasn't as strong as hers. Then Wei Shiyu says she was really happy to see that Chen Bai was so strong and relieved to know Songji was alive. With that resolved, she explains that she locked him in the room, imagining he'd already be dead, and Chen Bai explains that the virus weakens over time. That gives her an idea, and she says she hates Jiang Luping so much, asking for him to die with his eyes open. They open the door so Jiang Luping can see them kissing, while he writhes in hatred and pain. After that, Chen Bai asks if just one kiss is enough, and she explains that it is because that was her first kiss. 2 days pass, and the protagonist is wandering through the Wucheng forest when he receives a private call from Ziqian. She mentions that her men managed to find Shui near the river, and that they were on their way back. But she also warns that rumors have emerged about a chat group full of people who awakened their powers before the apocalypse, placing him as the leader. Ziqian asks if it's true, and Chen Bai confirms, reminding her they had talked about evolution before the apocalypse. His partner gets excited about potential allies in the future, while asking about the conversations involving the chat called Group 001. Our protagonist asks her to send him the titles of the conversations so he can think about what to do. While reading one of the posts, Chenbai thinks it's the perfect time to make the group famous to gain more impact. But at that moment, the scenery around him changes, and he receives a notification that he has entered the secret village that worships demons. Chenbai gets excited because in his past life he received an S-rank mission in that location. His objectives would be to prevent the villagers from summoning demons and to eliminate all the infected and summoned demons. He remembers that a man named Chen Yiking was leading a group to explore that location, promising great rewards. It turns out that back then, he believed Yiking's words, not knowing that his plan was to send the group into battle and flee right after. That's because when the Evolvers died, the demon would be weakened, allowing Yiking to face it at a manageable level. Around 100 people had been recruited for the group, and none of them managed to properly prepare to resist. As a result, many of them lost their lives either to the demons or to Yiking's helpers. Only a few were left who tried their luck facing the demon, merely seeking a chance to survive. After all the members of the group had died, Yiking finally launched his attack with his allies against the exhausted demon. But he didn't notice that Chenbai was still alive, hidden. Realizing he would be killed if found, the protagonist fled to the edge of the secret realm, hoping the initial objectives would allow him to leave. His luck was that just before leaving, the group managed to kill the demon, triggering a dice roll. With that, he received a class change scroll for Demon Hunter. Realizing this, he started laughing, imagining that Yiking's strategy had cost him the boss's best item. But knowing he would be hunted, Chenbai was forced to flee from Wucheng, and now he wonders what Yiking's face would look like in this life. The problem is that as he approaches, he finds a dead villager, while Yiking's expedition, supposedly the first to complete the dungeon, shouldn't happen for another 2 months. Even though he thought he didn't need to worry about someone arriving early, Chenbai now wonders who could have found that place. Meanwhile, a man was eliminating another of the contaminated villagers while his partner fought a demon. It turns out that Yiking had already started his mission in the dungeon, completing the objective of killing the contaminated villagers and now able to leave the area. But one of his partners warns that someone was approaching. That someone was Chenbai, who asks if they were heading out. Our protagonist asks if he could face the boss, and Yiking says he can do as he pleases. Chenbai recognizes Yiking, showing surprise that he managed to find the place so soon. The old trader tries to warn him to be careful because the boss is level 11, and the protagonist thanks him. At that moment, the demon appears in front of him, surprised that he wasn't afraid, assuming he had accepted death. But Chenbai explains that it had been a long time since he fought a demon alone, as he was always fighting in groups. When the demon thinks about attacking him, the protagonist ends the fight quickly, saying he couldn't even count how many demons he dealt with in his past life. Thanks to his experience as a demon hunter, he knew their weaknesses and movements, which made things much easier. With the demon's defeat, Chenbai completes the dungeon objective while noting that his skills haven't dulled over time. Yiqing's group ends up receiving experience from the fight, leaving him curious about the protagonist. After Chenbai absorbs the boss, he asks if the group was looking to split the rewards. Yiqing laughs, questioning the audacity of trying to take the loot since he wasn't the one who defeated the boss. Chenbai sees that he was being reasonable, recalling his true personality. He then tries to confirm if they really weren't interested in the rare potions or the rare S-rank mission scroll. He asked again while pointing the items out to him. The group leader admits he would be interested in the potions as they have very few for their team, but he acknowledges that he's not ignorant and that the mission rewards belong to the protagonist by right. Chenbai accepts his statement while holding the glowing red tubes, satisfied. Our protagonist asks him to explain why he came back, and Yiqing says he wanted to make friends and find out where he lives. That's because they were clearing the lands west of Wucheng and were afraid of trespassing on someone else's territory. At that moment, Chenbai remembers that Meng Meng lives near the sports complex. He believes Yiqing's real intent is to meet someone on his territory, so he tells him his base is in Jiangcheng. Our protagonist decides to investigate their influence near Meng Meng. Yiqing says they took over the sports complex and cleared the area recently, thinking they could be friends and help each other. But Chenbai knows that was a way to hide their forced takeover, understanding now why he never heard about Meng Meng in his past life. Then Meng Meng sends a message warning that some evolvers were approaching, and the protagonist tells her to keep them away until he arrives. Yiqing asks what he was doing as the protagonist prepares to take them out. Chenbai uses his powers to read the leader's mind, trying to discover the exact location of Meng Meng's house. People run in desperation while the protagonist realizes he'll need to keep someone alive to point him in the right direction. Meanwhile, in Building 16 of the Jinhui International Community, Meng Meng holds a bat to defend herself from the invaders. A man threatens to break in if no one responds after he counts to 3. Meng Meng orders the intruder to leave, saying he's not welcome and threatening to get rude if he insists. Upon realizing it was a girl, he and his companions felt excited, saying they were going to go in. With that, she let out a powerful scream that made the 3 of them bleed from their ears and mouths. This took down the 3 of them while leaving Meng Meng greatly weakened by the ability. She acknowledged that the ability required a certain physical level since it lasted only a short while and still ruined her throat. Noticing the external silence, she believed her ability had rendered everyone around unconscious. but one of the fallen men asked his partners to regroup on the 12th floor while reporting what had happened. 10 minutes passed and Meng found herself being threatened by other invaders again, thinking she would have to fight. The door was destroyed as the men entered, noticing she was a beautiful young woman and saying they would show her how a woman should scream. Exhausted, Meng wondered if she might be able to unleash the fire of hell to defend herself. With that, she used the black flames of hell to take down the other invaders. Although she realized her master was right about the 4 attributes, this only drained her even more. The situation worsened when other men invaded the place, saying she was finished and ordering her to kneel or die. But she refused to let herself be caught by them as she tried to make her way to the window. While one of the men mentioned that she had chosen death, the other told them to call their partners. As she tried to move away from them, the men grabbed Meng's arm. She screamed for help until a shadow appeared at the window. Bai smashed the window, striking the men and saving Meng. She apologized and the protagonist said it wasn't her fault, mentioning that she did great and asking her to rest. With that, he turned to the men, saying that anyone who dared to bother his apprentice would not leave alive. One man asked if the little girl had called for reinforcements. They didn't care and tried to take out the protagonist, but Bai dealt with the 3 of them without any difficulty. Then he asked if there was no one else alive in that place. Meng called out to her master, saying she was exhausted while groaning in pain. Bai said that exhaustion caused headaches and hallucinations, making her wonder where he had been. Our protagonist held her hand, saying he had been there all along. At that moment, another invader approached him from behind with an axe and tried to strike him. But Bai finished him off, telling Meng not to be afraid because her master would protect her. After that, he gathered his energy to take down all the other invaders in that place, saying that no one would hurt her. An hour later, her master mentioned that she was much better now. A hand held the door, putting the protagonist on alert. But the person turned out to be one of his followers, revealing that all of Yi King's forces had been eliminated. The man confirmed this, saying he followed his instructions to eliminate all of Yi King's followers. At that moment, Bai understood that only his trusted followers remained. With that, the man denied having followers, mentioning that he had a wife and children who were used to blackmail him. That was because his ability had been weak, his family might have been abused and killed like his neighbors and friends. Our protagonist praised the man's talent, recalling that he had been warned by him about the boss and invited him to Jiangqing. Bai said it was okay if he didn't want to go, as he would respect the choice of the man named Zhang Long. But Zhang Long said he was willing to accept and had only hesitated because he remembered the people enslaved by Yi King at the settlement. Our protagonist said that although he could take them, many people would make it difficult to go straight to Jiangqing, suggesting they stay there. With that, Bai handed him a strength potion while sending a friend request, asking him to let him know once he decided where he would stay. After Zhang Long, the protagonist opened his inventory. He reflected on the potion he gave to Zhang Long, noticing that the mask changed its shape after he removed the potion from the inventory. Our protagonist remembered that the mask had been changing whenever he stored items, recalling what he had recently placed in it. When Bai moved the items in the inventory, he noticed that the mask was watching the potion flasks. With that, he realized the mask always followed the potions, imagining it wanted to consume them. Since he had inferior potions, he decided to test using them to feed the mask, thinking it might unlock new functions. He gave it all the potions, and 5 minutes later, the mask appeared content. He wondered if all of that was just to receive a burp until the mask vomited a purple mass. Bai held the purple object that the mask vomited, discovering it was a purified demon blood essence. Our protagonist boasts that he can purify demon blood, as with the help of the secret realm, he could have a massive supply. With that resolve, he remembers that he hasn't had time to look at the transfer mission scroll. Upon analyzing it, it's recognized as an S-class demon hunter mission scroll, marked as unique and special. Then he sees the mission requirements asking to use the scroll and kill demons, making the protagonist decide to do it without rushing. Bai remembers that the place is dangerous and full of opportunities as he cuddles Meng. At that moment, she wakes up surprised to see her master sitting there. She hugs the protagonist in relief, crying as Bai explains that he had taken care of the invaders. Although Meng says she is too weak for that world, her master tells her that her focus should be leveling up. The girl says the requirement to level up is too much, since even by eliminating monsters in the dream, she couldn't improve. Our protagonist suggests returning to Jiangqing, where she's better, as there would be dungeons to explore. This proposal excites Meng, asking to leave immediately for Jiangqing. Bai stops her, saying it would take a month to reach Jiangqing on foot as he carries her in his arms. He jumps out the window, asking her to tap him if she feels too much wind pressure. After walking through the city for a while, the two arrive at the entrance of the secret village that believes in demons. Meng notices that the atmosphere had changed, and Bai explains that the only difference here is the dungeon entrance. With the protagonist's explanation, she says she will remember that and asks if her master wants her to lure the monsters. But he reminds her that they're not in the dream world, every skill matters, asking her to wait at the entrance. With that, he follows the path into the forest, taking out demons and dark priests. Trying not to waste time, Bai follows the path to defeat the boss quickly. Upon finding the enemy group, he observes them from above until being noticed by the leader. This dark priest declares that the intruder will be a sacrifice to the demon god. But he is quickly defeated by the protagonist, who completely absorbs him with his evolution devour skill while being surrounded. As everyone tries to strike him, the protagonist activates his shield to defend against the attacks. Then he receives the notification that by defeating Dark Priest, hidden high, he earned 45,000 XP thanks to his special lineage. Realizing he could use evolution to devour on enemies with demonic lineage, he decides there's no need to hold back. With that, he uses his tentacles to wipe out all the enemies at once. He notices that he could extract Demon Potion, realizing that mini-bosses had potions equal in quality to the bosses. Our protagonist observes the defeated enemies, saying that while elite monsters drop lineage potions, the regular ones do not. Meanwhile, Meng notices that her master killed the boss and several mini-bosses. This discourages her, imagining that Chenbai might forget about her since she wasn't gaining any experience this way. But at that moment, Chenbai tells her to prepare her most lethal skill while running from something. He assures her not to worry as the enemy wasn't at full strength and she would still be fine. Meng agrees to the request without fully understanding and uses her scream, taking down several enemies along the way and gaining levels and attributes. With this teamwork, Meng reached level 6 while Chenbai says he reached level 9. Then the girl hugs her master, thanking him for the help until he receives a video call from someone marked as Yai. Our protagonist answers the call, noticing his partners were worried. Zixiong urgently asks for help, saying a goblin self-proclaimed as the god of trade arrived at the settlement, surprising Chenbai. He assumes it must be Lido, wondering how he ended up at the settlement, which surprises Zixiong as he knows who it is. She explains that Lido offered an A-class construction order as an investment, but his condition was to have the best location for the Goblin Merchants Guild and lifelong tax exemption. Our protagonist believes this would be a no-loss investment as recognized states receive many advantages. Zixiong agrees while mentioning the construction order should be used immediately. He says he'll be back soon, asking her to relax. His partner asks if Chenbai prefers to wait a day before accepting, and the protagonist says she can mention him. With that, Zixiong understands what he meant. Our protagonist calls Meng to look at the equipment he had, saying she should use it for physical training. Chenbai mentions a complicated situation at the settlement, fearing she may not be able to keep up with his speed. After putting on the clothes he gave her, Meng notices her aptitude rising above 30 along with an increase in her defense. Back at the settlement, Zixiong apologizes for the delay, saying they accepted the investment. Lido praises her for leading such a large settlement in the apocalypse while managing thousands of evolvers. She returns the compliment, saying it's an honor that he chose to invest in her settlement. With that, the goblin god believes she can turn the place into an ideal city-state for evolvers. Then he asks them to take care of his merchants guild when they arrive, and the girl agrees. At that moment, Zixiong mentions that someone from the administration admires him, as upon hearing about the goblin guild in the city, they rush back. Lido asks who that person is, as few evolvers know about his connection to the Goblin Merchants Guild. Zixiong says he should know him, mentioning the protagonist's name, which leaves the goblin god speechless. The goblin god becomes uneasy until he says he didn't know Chenbai was around, claiming he has a better proposal. He presents an order from the Golden City, saying an A-class city task won't be hard for the boy. Lido hands over a mission tied to the investment order, which surprises Zixiong as it involves resisting a monster attack for 5 days. Zixiong notes that this would require a much larger space compared to a typical A-class mission, but Lido warns that it will also be much more dangerous, asking if she still accepts the investment. Despite that, she accepts, confident she can count on the protagonist. One day later, Chenbai arrives back at Dongshan Village, being welcomed by his partner. He explains that he'll take Meng to her room while asking for a summary of the situation to understand the context. Zixiong explains that there are 20 minutes left before the mission starts and that she has already organized her defense tactics. Chenbai believes everything is prepared while his partner explains they've been in the dungeon and completed the plague set. That excites Chenbai so much that he says choosing her was the best decision he's ever made. His partner admits she felt more relieved seeing him carrying Meng as she was a bit nervous. But he explains that this is his disciple, asking her to call Songji to take care of her and notify him when the girl wakes up. That's because this girl would be the key to protecting the settlement. Chenbai prepares for the confrontation against the invaders alongside his partner. At the same time, the monsters surround Dongshan. He remembers that in his past life, his city was founded at level B, and because of that, the number of monsters was much smaller. Despite the absurd difference, the protagonist doesn't let himself be intimidated. There were only 3 minutes left until the monster attack, as Chenbai observed from atop the city walls. Zixiong announces the 5 days of monster attacks in Dongshan, having a child use her skill to spread the message. She explains that they have the strongest walls in the world and full resources to protect themselves from this attack. Then she mentions the team members, announcing the number of members at each level. To help them stay calm, Zixiong announces price discounts and various other benefits during this period. With 1 minute left, Zixiong asks if they're ready to reap money and experience from the fight. Our protagonist praises her speech while his partner mentions she feels more confident with Meng by their side. Kenbai praises the child's skill, asking that she be taken to a safe place. He asks Lu Li about the preparations for the broadcast, and she says she chose an advanced camera according to the instructions. With that, he orders the transmission to begin. This causes panic in the forum that was following the broadcast, awaiting the start of the battle. As the preparation period ends, the monsters grow stronger and rapidly evolve. Lu Li wonders why the siege became stronger, saying they could have eliminated the weaker zombies earlier. Zixiang reminds her that stronger monsters give more experience and coins, saying the protagonist already knew this would happen. He had explained that both experience and coins are tripled, and at that moment, he throws himself at the enemies. Kenbai begins the battle by infecting one of the zombies, causing a reduction in resistance. With that, he throws the infected zombie at the enemies so it can infect the others. But then he notices some infected zombies gathering while others back away. At that moment, the protagonist suspects there is a lord controlling the zombies. Even though he knows it would make things easier if he got rid of the lord, he remembers that it will take a long time to find it. Our protagonist realizes the lord wouldn't be on the front line, remembering that his allies were doing everything they could to protect the city. However, he fears that if he doesn't take down the lord soon, it will make the mission harder. Kenbai realizes he needs Meng and creates a shield with his power while hoping she wakes up. The girl wakes up being greeted by Songji, prompting her to ask about her master and where she is. When Songji tells him she's awake, Chenbai gets excited. Meng apologizes for fainting along the way, saying she already knows the situation. But before she heads into battle, the protagonist asks her to go after a specific zombie. After receiving the information about her target, Meng says she'll go to sleep, asking not to let anyone come near her. With that, the girl arrives at the battlefield through the dream world and observes the number of zombies. She uses her Dreamweaver ability to take out several enemies at once, but then she remembers her master's request, creating butterfly wings to fly across the field. By the afternoon of the first day, Chenbai retreats and asks about the city's situation, and Zichong mentions there have been no deaths thanks to him. She suggests he rest while her team defends the walls in his place. But the protagonist refuses, saying the situation isn't so good right now. When he explains about there being a lord controlling the zombies, Chenbai mentions that some special zombies still remain. Then the protagonist explains that maybe the lord is getting stronger, preparing for a direct attack. When Songji and Meng approach, he tells them not to stream that location. After removing the cameras, the protagonist explains that Meng's ability must not be revealed to anyone. He asks the girl if she found the lord, and she says no. Meng says that even though she sensed brief mental fluctuations, she couldn't track the location. Kenbai comforts her, saying he acknowledges her effort. Even so, the girl asks Songji for the map, showing the places where she noticed the appearance of several special zombies. She reports that there were strange zombies in Dongdang and others near the TV tower. Kenbai begins analyzing the locations, making Zixiong realize their plan is to end this as soon as possible. His partner asks about the level of these special zombies, and the protagonist mentions they're likely level 10 and number in the hundreds. Our protagonist believes there could be a way to win if he were the target. But with the lord controlling them, the zombies move through the city after civilians, turning it into a competition of who causes more deaths. Zixiong understands the problem and decides to focus all their forces on going after the lord as soon as possible. But the protagonist says he has an ideal candidate for the job. He speaks with an ally named Han who has high sensitivity to energy fluctuations. On the morning of the second day, Han Xiao arrives at the settlement, surprised by its size. Then he asks the protagonist if he could move to that settlement, and Chenbai says he could. This excites Han Xiao, while Meng asks which special zombie they would focus on at that moment. Kenbai announces that their first destination will be the Riverside TV tower, where several zombies are climbing. He warns that the lord won't let them eliminate the zombies, saying everything depends on Han Xiao. With that settled, the protagonist and the girl head into battle, making their friend think he should learn how to do that too. Meng uses her scream to lure the zombies to her, boasting that she's the most powerful in the dream world. But the zombies prove faster than she expected, and she realizes she won't be able to escape in time. Our protagonist quickly launches an attack and uses his hellfire to take out the zombies advancing toward her. At the same time, he gets rid of the zombies climbing the walls, giving Meng time to strike back as well. After finishing off the last of the zombies, the girl approaches, saying there were 297 special zombies. Kenbai says that even if more come if the lord dies first, the scattered zombie attacks won't be a problem. With that resolved, she asks if they should clear another enemy gathering point, but he says it's unnecessary as he receives a message that the lord has been found. Han Xiao points to the source of energy on the mountain, making the protagonist doubt this lord's intelligence. Although his friend is eager to face him, Chenbai says he needs to return to the real world. He remembers they're broadcasting the battle and says that defeating this lord would be perfect for boosting his fame. To thank him, the protagonist promises to give his friend anything that would be useful to him. Chenbai orders Meng to take him to eliminate the special zombies called Screamers because they are a threat. The two accept the mission while the protagonist prepares to return to the real world. Upon reaching a cliff, he observes, noticing the aura of a high-level evolved virus. At that moment, he is attacked by hunters, remembering that they are evolved and fast zombies. Kenbai recognizes that they are the Lord's bodyguards, knowing that their speed isn't much different from his. So the protagonist plans to pretend to be weak to expose their openings. The plan is to avoid a prolonged fight that would give the Lord a chance to escape. When the second hunter tries to attack him from behind, Kenbai acts first and takes them both down. After killing the zombies, he devours both, gaining a new form that generates blades on his arms called Blade Form. But then Kenbai is hit by a mental attack, realizing the Lord didn't flee, imagining he believes he can win. With a direct blow, the protagonist finishes off the Lord, thinking that boss was weak. At that moment, Zikyung appears running and hugging him for making it easier to break the enemy siege. His other girls show up asking to celebrate their victory, making Kenbai realize the Lord knew his weaknesses. But he shows that he didn't fall for the Lord's trick, destroying the fake images of his girls. Our protagonist tells him not to use such weak illusions so as not to embarrass himself. Then Kenbai explains that the Lord's mental energy is weaker than his. At that moment, he even laments that the illusions can't be seen on the broadcast. With that, the transmission switches to another room while the frontline battle begins. A group of zombies called Berserkers appear, throwing other zombies at the wall. Zixiang alerts the allies to kill anyone that gets thrown at them. The team members use their abilities to stop the enemies from landing inside the walls. However, one of them manages to land and uses a scream attack that prevents them from retaliating. At that moment, a desperate member announces a breach in the wall while running away, but Zikyung orders them to hold their positions while helping take out the invaders with her allies. Even a special zombie proves no match for her attacks as she finishes it using her amethyst spike. She announces that the protagonist will take down the Lord soon and all they need to do is endure this wave of enemies to win. With her speech, Zikyung draws the attention of the team members, who praise her skills and beauty. Meanwhile, the protagonist continues his fight against the Lord, who is transformed into a monster called Tyrant Chaser. The form keeps watching, impressed with the monster, while something emerges trying to surprise Kenbai. He dodges the attack, realizing he was being surrounded by several special zombies. After taking down a giant zombie with his hellfire, the protagonist charges at the Lord, who is planning to escape. Then the giant zombie tries to surprise him again. But Kenbai avoids being devoured by climbing up its arm, asking who gave it permission for that. Our protagonist finally gets rid of the giant zombie, turning his focus back to the Lord, who tries to strike him with a tentacle. After cutting off the monster's tentacle, he notices the Lord is weaker due to the plague he had used. Recognizing that the Lord is resistant to psychic flames, Kenbai charges at him. Even while being attacked by monsters summoned by his enemy, the protagonist finally manages to end the fight. After the battle ends, he realizes that the items he desperately needed were dropped by the enemies he defeated. While the forum is impressed by the items he acquired, Kenbai becomes curious about the C-rank weapon. He begins analyzing the various zombie types he had to face before discovering that the weapon has the power to evolve. Then Kenbai wonders if he can boost the virus evolution while absorbing the monsters in the field. Upon realizing he unlocked a new form, he opens his skill panel to distribute his points. With that resolve, the protagonist equips his evolution-ready gloves, excited to test them out. After that, he uses his aerial dash to return to his post in the battle. Back in the city, Lu Lai informs the protagonist's partner that he won his fight while adjusting the cameras back to the battlefield. Zixiang praises Suxin for her efforts since the beginning of the siege, saying she can rest after the attack ends. Although the medic says she can't ignore her allies being injured, Zixiang insists, reminding her they'll need her at the celebration. However, one of their friends appears saying the current situation wasn't the best. She explains that even with the Lord's death, the zombies had already gained extra strength and continued attacking. Moreover, since the enemy summoned special zombies, even without his leadership, the zombies kept attacking together. The protagonist's partner contacts Shui to ask about the situation at the post she was watching. She says her section could only hold for 3 more minutes, warning that the meat wall was being devoured very quickly. Even with Shui using her abilities to observe the entire battlefield, she wouldn't last much longer. Zixiang says she'll head to the front lines while asking her friend to send someone to assist Shui. On the front lines, Shoji says she's there to help Shuang. But her sister tells her not to get close as the enemies are far too fast. Despite Shuang's warning, she decides to act upon seeing her sister under pressure. But Kenbai arrives, teasing her before telling her to go announce that the Lord has been killed and to leave the rest to him. With the protagonist's attacks, he takes down the zombies, which excites Shuang. Songji shouts to the group announcing his return as Kenbai continues taking out the enemies. His allies continue eliminating the enemies alongside him, and with that, 4 days pass. Our protagonist acknowledges that the losses were greater than he expected, and Zikyung recalls that the walls were almost destroyed. She admits they overestimated their group's resilience and underestimated the challenge. At that moment, Leto appears, congratulating them on completing the mission, saying the losses were fewer than he expected. He asks them to build a city-state, which would be the first since the apocalypse. Zixiang asks if that's all it takes to create the city, and Chen Bai informs her they need to go to the right location. At the same time, people notice a light source on the ground, worried about what it could be. This light reveals itself to be a sphere known as the city core, which would allow them to create a city-state. The people recognize that it's an item that belonged to Zixiang as the protagonist arrives beside her. His partner explains that she hired a professional for help, saying that location was perfect due to being protected and rich in resources. Chen Bai praises Zixiang for her work and asks her to create the city-state. However, she says she has a request for Mr. Lido before doing so. That's because she wants Chen Bai to be a lord of that city. The Goblin God says the city core is hers and that she only needs to fulfill a promise to the Goblin Merchants Association, which she confirms she'll hand over the authority they requested. Chen Bai steps forward and begins the creation of the city-state. He acknowledges that it's time to rebuild his city of Emperor Bai. At that moment, the cosmic panel reveals that the city lord receives advantages within the city, while his enemies have reduced stats. Zixiang receives a message saying she's been granted the highest level of authority in the city along with an 80% bonus to her attributes. The crowd celebrates as they receive attribute points for helping defend the city. Lido congratulates him, leaving Zixiang confused by his attitude. The Goblin God says everyone is satisfied while reminding the protagonist that he needs to complete his quick investment tasks. Chen Bai mentions that his task is quite difficult, prompting Lido to say he trusts his abilities. Our protagonist hands 2 scrolls to Zixiang, asking her to begin the plans for the city. He explains that the items produced with the scrolls can help them with challenges and boost the settlement's development. Although Zixiang believes they wouldn't be able to create the known weapons, the protagonist reminds her that they follow attributes. He adds that in the future, other city-states will create even more extraordinary things. As an example, he mentions creating clones to allow for a second life or even an S-level anti-gravity base. Understanding the protagonist's vision, his partner promises to make this city the most powerful in the future. Meng comes running to tell her master that she unlocked new abilities. When he analyzes her dream totem skill, Chen Bai praises her for choosing something that lets her draw people into dreams unnoticed. She explains that this combination was something he told her about after seeing her skill tree. Then the girl shows her other new ability, which allows her to teleport near her allies using the totem. Chen Bai says she's doing great at choosing her skills, and she realizes she needs to train them, asking him to help her. He asks her to wait at the training grounds, saying he'll come shortly. Our protagonist asks Zixiang to call team members to help test Meng's abilities. But she asks him not to take too long because the girls want to reward him for the victory. She also says that Xiaoji had prepared a surprise for him. Back at Zixiang's house, the girls are getting ready for the reception, wondering if they would be able to surpass the protagonist this time. One of them confirms that they would while teasing Songji for fainting right at the beginning, which leaves her quite embarrassed. That night, Chen Bai asks what Meng wanted with her partner, and she explains that the girl wanted to know a dungeon to train in. He asks her to tell Meng to talk to him later, and Zixiang says she already did. After that, she mentions that all the girls in the harem wanted him to help them choose their skills. Songji appears from under their blanket, making the protagonist mention that there wouldn't be much he could help with. Seeing that the girl was insisting, Chen Bai asks them to show their skill trees. That excites all the girls while the protagonist starts by observing his partner's skills, telling her to focus on Amethyst evolution. Our protagonist suggests picking the Amethyst Eye skill, which would allow her to control her enemies. Zixiang understands that the power to cause confusion and make her enemies lose their sense of direction just by looking would be very useful. Next is Xiaowei, who mentions having only 2 skill trees to use. Chen Bai tells her to evolve Threat Vision while using another skill to share her vision, becoming an indispensable support. Xiaowei mentions she'll work on unlocking it as soon as possible, and the protagonist says her basic skills are already impressive. Although Lu Lai says she doesn't have offensive skills, Chen Bai says she could even create miracles. That's because her skill recognizing the false true can turn illusions into reality if the target doesn't realize it's an illusion. He explains that the absence of damage isn't a problem since the mind creates reality. Zixiang asks if that skill wouldn't be abnormal, and the protagonist explains that it all depends on Lu Li's experience. Next is Suxin and her B-level skill, Rapid Recovery. Chen Bai explains that she should allocate points in stamina and mind because those abilities affect herself before others. Our protagonist praises her skills, saying he's never seen better medical talent. Then Songji shows up saying that since he had already finished with Suxin, it should be her turn. But he says he'll first check Lingyu's because hers is Class B, while Songji's is Class C. Upon seeing that her skill not only speeds up thinking, Chen Bai instructs her to choose skills for judgment and practice. Lingyu thanks him, saying she wants to repay him through actions, which makes Zixiang worried about how focused she was. But Chen Bai denies it, saying that if she doesn't control her focus, her skill would be useless. Finally, it's Songji's turn and she gets excited while he analyzes her skills. Despite noticing all her focus on skills and enhanced evolution speed, Chen Bai says she still wouldn't be able to defeat him. Zixiang asks them to dedicate themselves to evolving their skills so as not to disappoint the protagonist. Shuang hears the girls saying they'll give it their all and starts wanting help with her skills too. The next day, the protagonist goes to Hanshou's house, taking advantage of Meng Meng's totem power. But she complains of dizziness because of the teleportation distance, and Chenbai tells her to rest. Hanshou asks how the city is doing, and the protagonist says everything is going as planned. He asked about attribute points gained since his friend and Meng Meng killed special zombies in the dream. But he mentions receiving only one because there was an accident where a mental shock from an enemy knocked him down. Kenbai tells him not to mention being in group 001 to avoid embarrassment, while Hanshou says no one else knows about it. Then he says he was just joking and suggests going out when his friend is ready. Our protagonist looks at the mark on his hand, believing his mission has to do with the chemical factory Hanshou mentioned. His friend calls in while the protagonist is excited to find out what kind of rewards he'd get in that place. Kenbai remembers that he didn't want to check the mask in Jiangcheng for fear that Lido would discover he was hiding something. Then the protagonist discovers that the potions could be refined into S-class essence. Hanshou points out that they were close, pointing to the mysterious, thick green mist. Our protagonist asks if he knows the factory, and his friend confirms, saying he knew about it even before the apocalypse. When he tells them to head in for exploration, Hanshou asks if he should go too, as the green mist gives him a bad feeling. Chenbai warns him to just keep his distance and says he could take him to his father's workplace because it might trigger his mission. Hanshou agrees while putting on a mask to protect himself. Upon looking at the mark again, he notices the mission was activated. He must find the source of the mutation. Our protagonist remembers that upon reaching level 10, its abilities were enhanced and his virus control improved. He notes that he can control viruses within a 10-meter radius, while Hanshou is impressed by his reaction. When a giant mosquito monster appears, the protagonist charges at it and kills it in a single blow. Kenbai says he hates mosquitoes while his friend points to a mushroom that was protected by the monster. Our protagonist tells his friend not to get close, saying that if he wants to die from the virus, breathing it would be the least painful way. That's because the mushroom was a fusion of plague and bacteria before the protagonist eats it, saying he's immune. He mentions that one bite is equivalent to several elite zombies. After that, Chenbai calls him to head straight to the factory. Arriving at the plague factory of the Magic City, Hanshou starts looking for information, saying he hasn't found clues about his mission there. Kenbai proposes exploring the place on the condition that if he says to run, he must leave immediately. Upon arriving in another room, the protagonist recognizes the concentration of viruses, and his friend says it's where they dumped plant waste. Hanshou says they had two large and deep pools, which he only approached once because the air made him dizzy. When they reach the sewage tank, they notice the area is surrounded by giant mushrooms and insects. Kenbai tells his friend to wrap himself in mental energy to protect against the plague's corrosion. A man calls them children of the plague and servants of the virus while approaching them. But when he tries to get closer to the protagonist, he is struck directly by the plague blades. Noticing that he couldn't break his defense, Chenbai becomes concerned, wondering if an A-class boss's defense could really be that strong. Then the boss says he offers rituals and prayers for the god destined to ignite the divine fire. Hanshou asks if the boss is kneeling before the protagonist, who also doesn't understand. With that, the high priest named Pukexyumi explains that the protagonist is destined to be his god and promises to give everything to him. Kenbai reflects on Pukexyumi's level 71 and his own level 79 from his past life, noting the huge difference between them. When he asks if he's really the god, the high priest reveals that he sacrificed himself to ascend and affirms that the protagonist is the god of plague. Then Chenbai remembers hearing about exclusive opportunities, imagining that the god of plague power could surpass the demonic bloodline. Our protagonist asks what he could do for them, and the high priest mentions that they paid a high price to help him with a challenge. Pukexyumi considers himself lucky to have seen them and says each member can receive a treasure from the plague sect according to their strength. He also apologizes for not being able to give all the treasures directly to avoid cosmic interference. Kenbai asks if he had the class transfer scroll. The high priest confirms having the scroll his god wanted and presents 2 S-class scrolls and 1 S-class scroll. This impresses Hanshou for seeing an SS-class scroll. But Chenbai appears disappointed while Pukexyumi says that SS-class scrolls are nearly impossible. Our protagonist says that even though he already knew that, he still desires the SS scroll. This desire for power excites the high priest even more, who cries, believing the resurrection of the plague sect. To avoid wasting more time, the protagonist says that if it's not possible, he can take the rest. But Pukexyumi says there might be a way to obtain an SS scroll. He says it's not guaranteed and that the protagonist will have to retrieve it on his own because the plan is to open a special secret area for the greatest plague event of the Blue Star. Our protagonist believes it could be a good idea to take this opportunity. With that, the high priest says he will sacrifice his life to become a stepping stone for his god. At that moment, he is engulfed by flames that consume him. Upon doing so, a notification appears stating that the entrance to the secret instance, the Laments of 8 million souls, has been created. Kenbai explains that it is an exclusive instance and Hanshou understands that he won't be able to participate. Then the protagonist says he'll send him back so his friend won't get killed or infected. After returning to the city, Han Xiao sits down to post on the forum about what just happened. His allies start arguing until Yizai tells the protagonist's friend not to use him to show off. Meanwhile, the protagonist wonders how the hourglass of time appeared. Then he realizes he's standing next to a Roman stone gate, imagining the secret space to be in Florence. He walks through the city, noticing there are no more people on the streets, until he finds a cloaked person sitting in a dark alley. When he tries to approach, the person tells him to stay away because she's tainted, saying she received a divine curse. But Chen Bai reaches out his hand, absorbing the virus while asking if that person wants to live. At that moment, he absorbs the Black Plague virus, realizing he needs to collect it somehow. The cloaked person then reveals herself to be a girl, who becomes happy on noticing she's been cured and thanks the messenger of the gods. Realizing he can receive help from followers to make his information gathering easier, the protagonist accepts her help. But at the same time, he denies being a divine messenger. The girl wonders which god he serves, and the protagonist says he's not a messenger of any god. Chen Bai declares himself to be god of plague and asks her to gather everyone so he can heal them. The woman calls for those afflicted by the plague to gather, saying the god of plague has descended to the world and is in the square. She promises that the god of plague will free them from the disease, saying that if they still doubt, they can see with their own eyes. An infected man asks who's shouting outside, while his partner says it's Alina, who must have gone mad from the disease. Alina introduces herself as the daughter of the wealthy merchant Henry and says she's been cured. At that moment, an older woman opens the door asking if it's true. The woman says the god of plague cured her and that they don't need donations, telling them to go to the square. Then, a local approaches and places a hand on Alina's forehead, amazed that she is truly healed. She becomes emotional, believing her children might be saved. Meanwhile, Chen Bai understands he must be in 14th century Florence, as it was the period when the plague claimed millions of lives. He imagines that if the plague seat isn't there, he might need to travel across the globe, until one of the townsfolk approaches him, calling him merciful god of plague, while Lina shows that she managed to call the people. Our protagonist asks them to come closer, assuring them there's no danger. Little by little, he begins to free the people from the plague through plague absorption. With that, the people feel relieved, having been saved by the powers of the god of plague, wondering if this isn't a miracle. When the people begin to kneel before the protagonist, he tells them to rise because they might feel discomfort from the plague's damage. He then asks them to leave quickly, as there are still many sick people. Chen Bai says he doesn't want them to kneel. He just wants everyone to be free from the torment of the plague. The older woman believes that her god cares about sinners, wondering how she could praise his nobility and greatness. Belina asks them not to disturb God's efforts and calls the healed ones to spread divine mercy throughout Florence. However, at that moment, the church knights appear, terrifying the people who flee. They mention having received a report about a false god and his heresies. One man asks if Chen Bai is spreading heretical beliefs, as he heard that he claims to be god of plague. Then the knight mentions that the plague is divine punishment while charging at the protagonist. At that moment, Chen Bai believes it's his chance to fully become a god and allows himself to be struck by the knights. After that, the knight captain raises his sword, commanding the sinners to repent for their actions, until his men alert him that their target is still standing, which amazes them. Alina, furious, threatens to throw a stone at them, but Chen Bai stops her, saying he's fine, making her believe that the god of plague cannot be hurt. However, she demands punishment for the Knights of the Church of Light for their actions. Chen Bai disagrees with Alina, saying the knights cannot hurt him and that he will not hold a grudge against them. His words encourage the people who believe their god has a merciful heart. Some time passes, and the members of the Cathedral of Light recognize that the protagonist took only 3 days to convince 90% of the population. Bishop Haken complains to Bishop John for blocking his attempts to get rid of the god of plague, as his followers had greatly decreased. But John says he stands by his opinion, as he noticed Chen Bai needed only 3 days to cure the entire city. Additionally, he taught his followers ways to prevent the plague from spreading again. Even though he doesn't understand the terms used, John acknowledges that no doctrine would do this without asking for compensation. John also recalls that Chen Bai taught that no benevolent god would have people kill each other over beliefs. Despite explaining that this could cause everyone to rebel if they acted against him, Haken starts to doubt his colleagues' beliefs. But John says he remains faithful to his god, and that they should worry about themselves, revealing he already sent a message to the Pope. Meanwhile, in the royal hall, Chen Bai observes the plague seed he acquired by absorbing the virus from all of Florence. But since he still needs more of the virus to complete the concentration, he realizes he has a lot of work ahead. At that moment, Alina comes to inform him that his faithful followers are waiting. Upon leaving the royal hall, the protagonist is greeted by his excited people calling out to their god. Chen Bai announces that since he has finished his work in Florence, he will leave something for them before heading to his next destination. Then he creates a plague pillar, where he promises that anyone who prays in front of it will have their illnesses healed. But he warns them not to rely too much on the pillar, as once he completes his mission, the pillar will disappear. Our protagonist tells his people that living beings and diseases can coexist as long as they know how to use them correctly. Alina promises that they will follow the doctrines he taught, saying they even built their cathedral to spread his deeds. Kenbai says farewell to his followers, wishing that they never fall victim to another disease. Even outside the city, he can still clearly hear the praises of his followers, realizing how fanatical people can be. But he remembers this was his true desire because it can help him complete the mission much faster. Using his fame as a god, he can bring more people to collect more plague seeds, avoiding spending years on this quest. With that, he decides to use the name of a god to complete the instance. Several days pass, and a Vatican knight enters the Pope's chamber, receiving a warning that the failed expedition to the east has disappointed God. He mentions that at this critical moment, a heretic used the plague to steal many of their followers. The knight commander of the Templars, Soren, asks if the Pope is referring to the man who calls himself the god of plague. Despite Soren's doubts, the Pope explains the protagonist's deeds in Florence, which astonishes the knight. But even though Soren thinks he might be a deity, the Pope considers him a demon who released the plague to gain trust and then removed it. This theory from the Pope enrages Soren over the tactics used by the god of plague. But the Pope announces he has summoned the heretic to the main square, taking advantage of his presence in the Vatican. Their plan is to use the Spear of Longinus to eliminate the god of plague in front of the people and reinforce the name of God. Soren accepts the mission, vowing to kill the demon and anyone who learns the truth. Meanwhile, a boy introduces the Vatican's main square to Chenbai. He mentions that everyone has been looking forward to his arrival since they were notified. Kenbai recalls that despite all the cities controlled by the church having blocked him, he was warmly received in the Vatican. But he already understands that this is a setup to get rid of him, thinking it's a foolish tactic. Upon seeing the Church of Light's sculpture, he realizes the plan is to kill him in front of the people. Even so, he sees this as a chance to end the problems caused by the Church of Light and decides to face them head-on. At that moment, the people are saying that the church is about to judge the heretic who cured the plague victims. Some question whether he can truly do such things, while others believe it's all lies. Then Soren arrives wielding the Spear of Longinus, declaring he will destroy him right there. Our protagonist understands it will be the Pope and a Templar knight and wonders how prepared they are to face him. Kenbai explains that he has been ridding people of the plague, asking how they dare to invoke God's name to accuse him of being a demon. But the Pope claims it was revealed to him that the protagonist is a demon from the abyss trying to manipulate people. He says the demon's plan is to spread the plague, then cure it, leading the people away from God. With that, the crowd begins to doubt the protagonist's abilities, while others confirm that his deeds are true. This worries a mother because her son is dying, and she wonders why the church won't let him heal the boy before judging the protagonist. The Pope acknowledges that the plague has shaken people's faith. He then says that although they could forgive him for freeing people from the plague, he was still guilty of spreading it. As the Pope mentions that everyone's souls were condemned to hell, the people begin to turn hostile toward Chenbai. Soren states that the followers of God cry out for justice as he charges at the protagonist. But he stops the attack with a single finger, warning Soren to give up because that spear had already made the mistake of harming the Son of God once before. This impresses the knight, who freezes in place, while Chenbai asks the people why the church keeps preventing him from freeing them from the plague. After approaching the Pope, he says it's just the demon in disguise, enraging him. The people around begin to laugh at the protagonist's theory, but he says he can soon demonstrate that the Pope is truly a demon. With that, he strikes a blow to the Pope's neck, prompting the Templar knights to attack him. Soren becomes furious with the protagonist's actions, stating that he truly is a demon. The Templar leader demands Chenbai reveal his true form while he watches the Pope's body tremble curiously. Gradually, horns begin to grow on the Pope's head as he starts to transform into a demon, frightening the people. At that moment, he reveals himself to be a true monster, just as the protagonist had expected. It turns out that his powers would be far too advanced for that era, and arguing with the Pope would have been a waste of time. That's why he had planned to use an A-rank demonic blood essence that he had acquired when rescuing Meng Meng. The plan was to inject this essence together with a zombie virus as a guarantee that it would turn him into a monster somehow. With that, the Pope loses control and unleashes a fire breath in an attempt to kill the protagonist, who saves Soren. He recalls that the horns and fire were a sign that the demonic blood had taken effect. Soren becomes desperate, believing that the Pope truly was a demon. Taking advantage of the fact that the Pope's body is about to collapse, Chenbai says a demon has usurped the role of the Pope. Then the protagonist declares that he will deliver divine punishment upon the demon. As he points at him, the monster begins to be torn apart from the inside out. With that, the people praise him for slaying the demon, and Soren kneels, apologizing for the sins he committed. Kenbai explains that even though he admires Soren's loyalty, he never intended to punish him, saying that his goal was to free them from the plague. The Templar commander feels relieved, saying he will gather the people so they can be saved. After getting rid of the demon, Chenbai realizes he no longer has any problems to deal with as the church falls and the plague cult rises. He then manages to travel across continents, freeing people from the plague while encountering different empires and religions. With that, the protagonist takes 1 year and 5 months to finally complete the Plague Seed. He realizes he only needs to gather the virus from his pillars, noting that the mission was demanding even without facing powerful enemies. But Chenbai imagines that if he had known how much work it would take, he wouldn't have accepted the mission knowing the weight a year holds in his present. A notification appears asking if he wants to collect all the Plague Seeds from the pillars. When he confirms the request, his pillars begin to glow in front of his followers. Elena, who had become a high priestess of the cult, acknowledges that the journey of the god of plague has come to an end. She then reminds her followers to keep the teachings of their god in mind. She mentions that the plague cult does not desire catastrophe or extinction, and they do not glorify corruption or death. Their only wish is peace and happiness on earth and for everyone to be healthy. For that, they need to understand the plague so that they won't be harmed by it again. With this, their desire is to control the plague so they can eliminate sin and evil. Alita mentions that because of their ignorance, they used to kill one another, and now that they understand the plague, they will no longer attack each other. She then hopes that in the future, they can fight side by side to control the plague. They recognize that the plague has become their weapon to fight and protect the lives of demons who carry the plague. Their power will bring destruction to the enemies of life, and even if the world rots, those lives will be eternal. The chants of the cult echo throughout the world, delivering more virus points to Chenbai. Our protagonist recognizes that the prayers are sincere as he receives the notification that his mission is complete. With that, he returns to the factory, where he receives the SSS rank class change scroll, Life and Death. He notices that it didn't seem like a skill while recalling that Lito's mission only required 2 SS class scrolls. After obtaining the first, he realizes he'll have to pursue the second, remembering that the Abyss held another SS class scroll. But just as he intends to leave, he receives a notification that the mission at the Plague Factory has failed. Kenbai believes it's because he didn't find the source of the plague in the factory. He begins to suspect that with Pukekyumi's sacrifice, the source may have been lost and the mission failed. At the same time, he starts to suspect those mushrooms in the area. However, he decides to check on the state of the Emperor's city, realizing that only 4.5 days had passed outside the dungeon. Our protagonist believes this happened because of the hard glass of time that appeared in the instance. Seeing that Han Xiao also received the mission failure notification, Chenbai decides to check what he had been discussing during those days. Upon noticing that everyone was worried, the protagonist shows them he had received the SS class scroll. Everyone starts congratulating him for the achievement and discusses whether they should evolve the group into a league. Chenbai explains that a league would be a stricter organization, while their current group was more relaxed. When they start a vote to decide if the group should evolve, Han Xiao teases him, inviting him to sleep in his warm bed. Our protagonist tells him just to suggest a place to rest in the city while ignoring his comment. Upon arriving, Chenbai notices it's a great place far from any signs of viruses or living organisms. At the same time, 2 ghost girls sense his presence, and the older one says she'll kill him. Upon reaching a room, the protagonist takes the opportunity to rest without worrying about spreading the virus he accumulated. When he tries to grab his medicinal pillow, he ends up noticing something. That's because the medicinal pillow had become an item with a description stating it could increase longevity. At that moment, he decides to check his inventory and notices that most of the items he accumulated in dungeons had turned into actual items. With that, he remembers he also brought the Spear of Longinus, because he recalled seeing one in his past life as an SS-class weapon. The spear had been a gift from Soren when he left the Vatican, and he realizes that the spear had also turned into an F-class item. Remembering that everything that becomes an item through universal desire gains a unique characteristic makes him quite curious. He wonders whether Mr. Lorga would still become a great warrior without the spear he once possessed. But at that moment, his hand starts to hurt, and he realizes that the Spear of Longinus had rejected him. Kenbai believes he has been classified as one of the 5 rejected types, imagining that if the spear evolves, it could become a problem. So he decides to return the spear to his inventory and keep it there so it can't be used against him. But at that moment, he notices the door is open, even though he was certain he had locked it. Suddenly, a knife comes through the door aimed at his face, but the protagonist manages to catch it without much trouble. Realizing he couldn't see his enemy even with his powers, Chenbai assumes it must be a spiritual being. Sensing that it's a low-level enemy, he imagines he can take it down with his powers. Our protagonist remembers that even though he has around 300 points of spiritual power, he only has 1 skill that would work. To solve this, he begins searching for other skills that might help him as the knife floats beside him. Seeing that virus points won't help, he decides to look at spiritual powers. Kenbai keeps checking his options while dodging the attacks. After managing to evolve his powers, the knife falls and he realizes the spirit fled. Our protagonist gets excited, wanting to find out what kind of spirit was attacking him. With that, he acquires psychic vision and is able to see the 2 ghost sisters arguing. He realizes that both are high intelligence level spirits and wonders why they tried to attack him with a knife. Then he decides to use psychic perception to analyze their stats. The older one is named Yan Qi, with a low level and abilities to control objects and absorb yin energy. The younger one is named Yang Su, also low level, with the ability to control objects and possessing yang energy. Bai realizes they are evolved beings, thinking he's never heard of one that changed form due to their abilities. When Yan Qi tries to attack him again, he releases his energy to explain that he poses no threat as long as she gives up. At that moment, Yang Su asks him not to hurt her sister. Our protagonist says he just wants them to listen, while Yan Kai tells him not to even think about doing anything perverted. But then he decides to tease the older one, saying she's the one having perverted thoughts at that moment. Bai says he's going to ask a few questions, like if they know what happened to the world and about their abilities. Yan Sui explains that they know about the world and how to use the skill panel, while Yan Qi summarizes the apocalypse. Then he asks why their levels are so low, thinking they were afraid to face monsters. The younger one says she couldn't hurt them because they were once human. But the protagonist says that's a stupid idea because someone capable of harming them might appear, as their abilities are very dangerous. With that, Bai tells them not to let themselves be controlled by their emotions. Our protagonist tells them to close their eyes and try to control their power while focusing on what they want to do. Yan Su wishes to protect everyone, while Yan Qi wishes to kill anyone who approaches her sister. Noticing that their reasoning was greatly impaired, Bai decides to help them before they become two monsters ruled by instinct. He understands that to train them, he must first reduce the effects of their energy. With that, Bai decides to use his telekinesis to play around a bit while refining his control. First, he decides to restrain them, which irritates the older sister. But the protagonist tells her to resist with all her strength until they run out of energy. He remembers that he never trained his mental abilities in his past life, and that's why he isn't so strong now. Little by little, he realizes that controlling two spirits could be difficult. Then they stop resisting, and Bai believes it's because they understood he wasn't really going to hurt them. With that, the protagonist decides to explain that if he doesn't help them control their emotional energy, they could become vengeful spirits. At that moment, Bai says it might be better to kill them right now and rips the clothes off both of them. After having fun with the sisters, he goes back to asking what they would do if they encountered a zombie. The younger one says she would kill the zombie to protect people, and the older one says she would focus on killing the zombie first and foremost. Then he realizes that both have regained their reasoning, even if one is still the good one, and the other the bad. Yang Sui thanks him, while Yan Qi promises she'll get revenge for the brutal treatment they received. Ignoring the threat, the protagonist explains that he can now start teaching them basic techniques. With that, he tells the two to try releasing their accumulated energy and manifest clothes. The two begin to slowly form pieces of clothing. Bai explains that body energy would be determined by the user's skill, and that he would use the rest time to train them. A few days later in the Red Star Dungeon, the sisters show that they've evolved their abilities. At the same time, they show they've learned how to absorb yin-yang energy from zombies. Yan Qi asks how they did on the mission, excitedly clinging to his arm. However, Bai warns that it's useless to try to invade his body with her energy. She says the reason must be that he's a bad person, and that's why her evil powers don't work on him. At that moment, he receives a message saying that Sword Immortal had summoned him for a nightmare-level dungeon. Analyzing the mission data, he wonders why they're in such a rush as there's a level restriction. Bai imagines that the reason he never heard of Sword Immortal in his past life is because he died in this dungeon. After forming the team, they start to argue until Sword Immortal mentions he has his reasons for calling the protagonist. Our protagonist tells the sisters to stop and go home. Yan Kai says she could still keep fighting, but Bai warns that they wouldn't be able to handle the monsters ahead, especially the boss, who had mental powers. That disheartens Yan Qi, while Yang Su says they would listen to him. Meanwhile, at the base of Mount Shushan, the protagonist arrives using Meng's teleportation totem. She introduces the protagonist to Zhengsu Buxu, who asks to be called simply Zhengsu. Then someone else arrives leaning on Zhengsu, saying he's the Sword Immortal and his name is Chu Zixun. At that moment, Bai notices he carries several swords, imagining Zixun has a sword-based ability. Zixun says he's right while showing his skill panel. Our protagonist praises his ability to create sword techniques and to charge energy into his sword. The swordsman becomes embarrassed by the compliments before the protagonist calls everyone to proceed with the mission. Sword Immortal asks if they had received the information, and Bai mentions that the mission would be to complete the mountain path. Meng becomes worried about the information, believing it wouldn't be that easy, and the protagonist says he'll stay alert for surprises. As they begin to climb, they reach a point where they are covered by mist. Bai warns them to watch their steps and their surroundings so they don't fall. Then they encounter someone climbing the mountain, repeating that the path was treacherous. But when the protagonist tries to approach him quickly, the old man suddenly appears much farther away. This impresses the protagonist, who believes something is wrong. He uses his ability to attack the old man and realizes that he was an illusion. Meng asks who the old man was, and her master reveals it was an illusion and tells them to pay attention to his phrases. Zixud repeats the old man's phrase about the 5 elements of heaven and earth creating obstacles. With that, Zhengsu imagines that the mist is the water obstacle, which reduced her visibility. At that moment, the old man changes his phrase, saying that it would be hard to return once someone sees the flowers in the mist. Bai already imagines danger approaching and equips his gloves. A sword appears out of nowhere and nearly hits the protagonist, who protects himself with his shield. realizing it could overpower his defense. After that, Meng becomes worried about her master's condition. The swordsman warns them to be careful because he can't use his abilities to foresee the attacks. Zhengsu tells him to activate the talisman he received, and Zixin says it wouldn't help at the moment. Still, he activates the golden protection talisman, creating a barrier around them. Noticing the direction from which the attack would come, Zhengsu uses his lightning technique to reveal the sword. The strike is blocked by the barrier, startling Meng. When Chenbai considers analyzing the sword, the monk warns that the barrier won't last much longer. But the protagonist says it's not a problem because he managed to subdue the sword. He wonders since when holding a sword counts as subduing it, while the swordsman reminds him that the sword had consciousness. With that, the protagonist decides to show the sword's stats to explain why it was so powerful. Zhengsu understands that the sword had gained strength from the mist, which is why the barrier didn't hold. Although Chenbai believes it would be better used by Zixin, he can't hand it over yet because he's using a special method to hold it. But the swordsman says he prefers to cultivate the sword's spirit himself to form a stronger bond. Meng asks if the 5 elemental obstacles are sword spirits. He thinks it's a shame because he could only maintain 3, even though he wished to obtain all 5. After dealing with the danger, the protagonist says they could continue climbing. Zhengsu acknowledges that they could complete the dungeon with the protagonist's help. 10 minutes pass, and they finally get past the first obstacle, reaching a plain. The swordsman sees the old man climbing the mountain in the distance. He had gone back to repeating the earlier phrases as he continued walking. This time, the warning was that the forest had hidden monsters, and that every tree or patch of grass could be an enemy. Chenbai understands that this time it would be a group battle, which excites him. The trees and plants begin to come to life and walk toward the group. This excites the protagonist, who says he loves going straight into battle. The monk wonders what the old man's phrase meant, while his friend says that won't be necessary, because the protagonist had already taken care of all the enemies along the way. Chenbai stares at the other sword, which was the elemental spirit of wood. Meng tells the two not to fall behind while they still don't understand what is happening. As they continue on the path, they find the old man now speaking about stones that can shatter and fall into the abyss. At that moment, several stones begin to fall, making movement and vision more difficult. Zhengsu realizes they can't continue and pulls out a barrier talisman. But Meng tells him not to use it yet as she holds up a pair of protective goggles. Although the monk thinks she was prepared, the girl explains she was using her power to create it temporarily. Chenbai compliments her for not needing to protect her face anymore while imagining it's still uncomfortable to have sand hitting the goggles. At that moment, he hears a strange noise, and although he dodges a stone, Chenbai and Zixin are knocked down. The other two worry that they might get hurt and wonder what they could do. When Meng intends to go after them, a sand whirlwind appears. The girl believes it is her master until he reappears on the stairs holding the swordsman. Chenbai explains that just a few uses of his jumps already left him exhausted, mentioning that it wouldn't be good for the girl to try to help them. Zhengsu suggests they take a moment to think about how they could deal with the cliff sword. He already warns that the sandstorm was preventing him from predicting the attacks. But the protagonist explains that they just needed to focus on the vibrations to know the right moment to dodge. Zixin praises him for noticing that with just one attempt. Not wanting to waste time, Chenbai tells them to wait for the next attack or stay close to him if they can't react in time. With the help of the protagonist, the group managed to keep climbing despite some problems. With that, they completed the third obstacle, hoping to finish the level soon. Meng asks if he wouldn't want to go after the Earth Sword, and the protagonist simply says no. The monk explains that besides being incompatible with the other two, it could restrict the power of the Water Sword. Chenbai explains that since he could also only control 3 swords, his last one would either be the gold or the fire one. After a while, they pass through the cliff and arrive at a desert where the old man talks about the scorching sun possibly causing dizziness. The two partners complain about the heat, imagining that the fire sword spirit was trying to incinerate them alive. Meng mentions that even when she manages to produce water, it evaporates too quickly. Meanwhile, Chenbai is doing fine, saying that brutality isn't the only form of fire, because he believes the plan was to wear them down patiently while waiting for the right moment. Zixin realizes the protagonist noticed when the sword would attack them, and Chenbai mentions it would be when they were dizzy. The monk is left speechless as the sword appears, attacking him. But the protagonist manages to stop it and saves Zhengsu's life. After analyzing the sword, Chenbai tells them to finish this part of the path quickly so they can rehydrate. After passing through the desert, they find the old man who says that with golden light, a divided body could not be reunited. Realizing that the next challenge would be a fight and that he already had the fire sword, Chenbai decides to take down the gold sword. When they arrive at the location of the gold sword, they see only a base resembling a ring where the sword was waiting. Zixin is surprised that it is an unfinished sword, while Zhengsu wonders how an unpolished sword could shine like gold. Our protagonist believes they don't need to waste time thinking and charges toward it. As he continues confronting the sword, it wears down more and more. But at the same time, it keeps recovering, making Chenbai realize what this obstacle was about. That's because the sword was able to increase its stats as it took damage, imagining it was a form of refinement. At that moment, he decides to test something and uses his abilities to destroy the base to finish off the sword. Dengshu asks if they heard the protagonist's conclusion, and the swordsman wonders if the sword could keep improving forever. After that attack, the sword looked brand new, allowing Chenbai to finally wield it. He had noticed that by reducing its constitution, the sword was able to enhance its strength and speed. With that, he starts provoking it, trying to test the sword's physical condition by twisting the blade. Because of the strategy used, the sword breaks easily. Our protagonist is happy to realize that the gold sword wasn't that good, and that it was quite easy to kill. Meng mentions that the old man had appeared again, repeating his phrases. But this time, he mentions that after finishing off the elemental spirits, there would be an endless path in search of Tao. As he descends the stairs, the old man asks why suffer so much in the pursuit of immortality. At that, the girl is confused by his behavior, and Chenbai suspects that it's not a good sign. Just to be safe, he tells Zixin to stay in front of the group. That's because if they don't have a firm heart, the path won't appear, making Zengsu believe only he could show the way. Our protagonist decides to tease the monk, asking what the reason was for the old man to descend the mountain, and he says he isn't sure. But Chenbai understood that this was a false clue, indicating that the path would be downward. Besides that, he mentions a chill down his spine, feeling that the old man would kill anyone who turned back. While the swordsman panics, wondering if he could complete the challenge, Chenbai decides to provoke him. After walking for 4 more hours, they finally manage to complete the dungeon and reach the top. There, each of them receives a reward called the Shushin token before revealing a chest. They notice that the token granted access to the Shushin map from levels 10 to 89. Despite that, Chenbai isn't too excited because his desire was to get the SS scroll and complete Lito's mission. Zixin asks the protagonist to be the first to open the chest, and he thanks him. Zhangshu says he doesn't care about the treasure, as he's just happy to have the token. Back at the abandoned hotel, Chenbai was resting until he was greeted by the ghost sisters. He teases Yan Qi, saying that even though she looks weak, they still wouldn't be able to defeat him. Putting the teasing aside, the protagonist mentions that he got a skill book that would be perfect for them. He then promises that if they managed to knock him down, they could keep the book. Even so, the two can't beat him and end up exhausted. Chenbai says they were able to spot his openings, making Yan Qi ask why he seems so careful with people. But he says it's just the fact that he can control his strength, while handing over the book for their effort. However, since both were still exhausted, the older one can't hold it. She says they could wait until they recovered since the book wasn't going anywhere. Our protagonist says he'd have to leave, while the younger one asks if he wasn't going to take them to the city. Chenbai explains that he had more important matters, saying he'd take them after he returned. This excites Yang Sui, saying she'd wait for his return. Since he had obtained the scroll and already maxed out his level, it was time to complete the mission to surpass level 10. At that moment, he takes the class promotion scrollless, remembering he didn't plan to use it at first. However, realizing he had no other choice to get the SS scroll, he decides to accept. With that, he ends up on the first floor of the Abyss, where he is found by some demons. Chenbai remembers that in his past life, he became a demon hunter, and now he felt like he was coming home. His challenge begins simply, taking down 3 out of 100 demons. Seeing that he would be sent away from the Abyss after completing the challenge, he decides to go easy. That's because his wish was to do this to enter the Abyss and find the well challenge. A day passes while the protagonist holds back from completing the challenges. Even though he could easily wipe out the group that was chasing him, he knew another one would show up soon. At that moment, he notices the well was erupting. He understands that it's not a good sign because even if it doesn't affect the challenge, the demons would become stronger. In addition, it could expel several demon eggs, increasing their numbers even more. Chenbai can't face the enemies because if he completes the demon-killing challenge, he'd be sent away. Suddenly, a sword appears, trying to strike the protagonist, who manages to dodge. With that, a warrior demon named Fergus lands on the sword, saying he found a perfect dinner. Our protagonist is impressed by a pure-blood demon on the first level. Fergus acknowledges that he knows quite a lot from being able to speak the demon language, saying it didn't matter. Chenbai asks if he knows why he was running from lower-level demons. Then the warrior demon says he'll allow him to speak before devouring the protagonist's head. But Chenbai just takes out the demon with ease. After that, he simply explains that he had already killed all other demon species. Noticing that the demon eggs were hatching, the protagonist decides not to waste any more time. After 6 days, he finally gets close to the well, realizing it was still quite far. At that moment, Chenbai decides to rest in a spot he had used for rest in his past life. He then takes the opportunity to feed the mask with more potions to clear out his inventory. But with that, another demon appears, watching him from afar. This new demon mentions having received a warning from his servant about a human trying to reach the abyssal well. The demon was a level 18 Ku Tao fish who recognizes the protagonist as the one his servant spoke of. Chenbai realizes that this was also not a demon that should appear on the first floor. He then asks if Ku Tao rises there when the well erupts. But the fish demon mentions being a prince who came to finish him for daring to roam freely through the abyss. Ku Tao uses his water blade attack to strike the protagonist, But Chenbai defends himself with his Hellfire armor, which creates a fire barrier. With that, he mocks the demon, asking whose offspring he is. The fish demon says he is the son of the Lord of the 17th floor while trying to hit him with his trident. Chenbai uses his muscle enhancement ability to finish off Ku Tao. He says he was just trying to rest when he came to interrupt. With that, he finishes off the demon, saying that his bloodline would make a good appetizer. After dealing with the fight, he feeds about 10,000 potions stored in his inventory to the mask. Meanwhile, he analyzes the demon's trident, thinking it would be a great acquisition due to its underwater breathing ability. With that, he continues on his path toward the well until he finally arrives. Chenbai observes the well, seeing a warning along with several waves of energy. At that moment, something notices him, sending chills down his spine, and the protagonist understands that he won't have another chance to catch it. He also remembers that in his past life, although many level 10 disciples tried, none of them made it out alive. This being realizes he hasn't advanced his class yet as several messages appear. Despite all these issues, Chenbai receives permission to proceed through the Abyss Challenge path. He then receives the information that if he completes the challenge, he could receive an SS class scroll, which excites him. Chenbai is informed that he must jump into the well to start the challenge, and if he tries to retreat, it would be a permanent abandonment. With that, he jumps, receiving the message that he must defeat the projections of level 10 demons under special conditions. At that moment, he thinks that since all cooldowns will reset, it might compensate for the more than 70 years of the time hourglass. Until he receives the warning that he cannot return to his limit state, making Chenbai hope nothing bad happens. He gets a message saying he can go back in time and erase everything that happened in the erased timeline. Chenbai notices the time hourglass appearing, thinking that the Abyss shouldn't be able to reset that ability. After accepting the conditions, he fully recovers and the challenge begins. He mentions that there were no problems, and with that, the Abyss challenge won't be difficult. The challenge begins with a level 10 demon named Balkik under no special conditions. Gradually, he moves through each level without issues until reaching level 66 against the demon Adu, where he can only hit weak points. This starts to make things harder for the protagonist as he notices his advantages greatly decreasing. Realizing he has no real edge and needs to discover the weak point, he decides to take the damage to win the fight. Chenbai faces the demon head-on until he needs to retreat a little, but then the demon throws his sword and lands a direct hit. After removing the sword from the protagonist's body, the demon praises him, saying that even though he's a fool, he has endurance. However, since the demon holds the blessing of the Abyss rules, he claims he never had a chance. But Chenbai says his enemy is relying too much on victory. With that, he manages to rip out 2 chunks from the demon's belly and wins the fight. After defeating him, he completes the 66th level, saying that the fool was his enemy for not dodging unless his weak point was targeted. After many battles, he finally reaches the 100th level, needing to face Gilbert with no special conditions. This surprises Chenbai as he's one of the weakest demons and has no restrictions. Our protagonist wonders why his enemy hasn't appeared, until he remembers that relationships in the Abyss are complex and a weak demon could become a lord for many reasons. With that, he understands that it would be a challenge to locate his enemy while the demon starts emerging from his shadow. When he comes out from the protagonist's shadow, he lands a precise strike. Because of that, he returns to the first level, surprised at having been killed instantly, twice. As he finishes off the level 1 demon, Chenbai understands that if he hadn't activated his power, he would have died. Our protagonist decides to start questioning the level 1 demon about the enemy from level 100. But he refuses to say anything, reminding the protagonist that his enemies are only projections who don't fear death. Reaching the 72nd level, he starts changing his tactics, which leads the demon to mention the protagonist would be killed by a fallen demon. He pretends not to know anything to get more information. With that, the demon mentions that Gilbert had upgraded the Shadow Swordsman class and could defeat the Duke Demon. After receiving this information, Chenbai thanks him while crushing his enemy's head. After that, he manages to reach the 100th level again, now knowing about the ability to hide in shadows. Even though he knows he has no advantage against a Shadow Swordsman, he knows he can handle a fallen demon. All he needs to do is avoid wide shadows while releasing his virus, waiting for the demon to strike. After running for a long time, the protagonist gets tired and needs to access his saved status to recover his energy, until he realizes there's something wrong with that place. However, he manages to block Gilbert's attack with his shield. Then Gilbert tells him to put away his sword because he had already won the fight. That's because the challenge prevented the demon from using his full power, while his virus had already worn him down too much. Chenbai still doubts his enemy's words while keeping his weapon ready. Gilbert invites him to face him again if he manages to complete the challenge, although he doubts the protagonist will be able to. Our protagonist promises that he will succeed and have a direct fight against the true demon. Finally, the protagonist reaches the 200th level where he's supposed to face the fallen angel Elmia. He assumes he was called there to start the battle. However, Elmia just stares at him while sitting on her couch, saying it would be too much trouble to clean the place. Her original plan was just for him to move along, but she got a bit curious. Then she invites him to sit at the table with her and have a drink. Kenbai asks what made her curious as he approaches. She wonders how he managed to reach the 200th level with his current strength, praising Gilbert's abilities. Additionally, Elmia notes that many other enemies would be much harder to deal with, but Chenbai says he can't reveal his secret to victory. Still, Elmia says she doesn't want to steal his secrets, just pass the time because she's bored. Accepting her request, the protagonist asks what the girl wanted to know. Then she asks about the disgusting enemy from the 105th level, which was a slime. Our protagonist mentions that it could consume things very quickly and managed to devour half of his body. The girl asks how he managed to defeat it, and Chenbai explains that he simply let himself be devoured. He'd figured the monster could devour his arm 100 times before realizing it was being poisoned. That excites Elmia, who says she never thought of ending it that easily. But the protagonist says it wasn't easy at all and very painful to keep removing his arm from his body. Then she asks about another individual named Finbu who hid in the sea. In this case, it was the enemy from the 136th level, the grandfather of the fish demon he defeated earlier, and he mentions having received some help from him. Elmia gets excited, asking how he handled the fight at level 153 against Hartley, since there was no place to hide. Kenbai mentions that he was killed 15 times in a row by her since the high temperature made his virus useless. Every time she got hurt, she returned to the lava and recovered. In the end, the protagonist took 5 whole days to fill the lava pit and end her joy. But he admits that she was his toughest opponent in those 200 levels. Then, when Elmia asks about the enemy from the 186th level, Chenbai asks her not to mention that one in such a fun moment. That's because the filthy Queen Omandi is considered the most disgusting enemy he faced in the Abyss. Chenbai mentions that when he had finally forgotten the smell of that place, she made him remember it again. The girl mentions that no demon could defeat her in her territory. However, she notices that even before mentioning Omandi, he hadn't touched the wine glass he was holding. Turns out he knew he couldn't drink the wine because it would kill him, as it had once before. Elmia realizes she's been caught and says she could tear him to pieces while drinking. Our protagonist asks if she intended to fight, and the girl just says she's too lazy to move. He realizes she really is very lazy, while Elmia mentions that making projections consumes a lot of her energy. But she already says in advance that there are still at least 6 divine enemies ahead, allowing her to do nothing. With that, he passes the 200th level wondering what those divine enemies would be. Kenbai knows that although he relies on the hard glass to keep fighting endlessly, he doesn't know if he can do the same against gods. Back in his recovery room, he remembers that each god possesses authority above the rules. His only hope is that they can't kill him with a single direct blow. But he believes that by using the power of the hard glass, he can find a way to defeat them. Reaching level 235, Chenbai finds himself collapse against an enemy who places him in an eternal dream. The demon Salisbury watches him while the protagonist just smiles, making him wonder what kind of dream he was having. It turns out his dream was being on a throne, receiving an elf girl as his loyal servant who would completely devote herself to him. He asks what she would do if he ordered her to give up her power and die. The elf then only cries, saying she would be completely loyal to him even if he didn't believe her. But he says he knows the truth, that she isn't loyal to anything and only wants to survive. Kenbai mentions that he could spare her life, and the elf thanks him, saying she would do anything. Then the protagonist shows a collar and orders her to put it around her neck to become his guard dog. The elf lowers her head, making the protagonist ask if she didn't want to obey him. But she simply puts on the collar, saying it is a great honor to serve her god. Back in the challenge, Chenbai starts talking in his sleep, saying that was the sound a bitch should make. That excites the demon, imagining he knew how to have fun. Salisbury says he would allow him to keep enjoying the dream forever inside him after absorbing his soul. However, at that moment, the swords attack the demon as he had fulfilled the special condition of seeing through the illusion. Kenbai acknowledges that even though the dream was very good, it wasn't real. The demon wonders when he managed to see through the illusion, imagining he did it without being noticed. Our protagonist says it was easy once he realized the demon couldn't recreate the pressure of a god, being just a projection. He explains that the method is simple, as the demon's power couldn't trap the sword's spirits and illusions. Salisbury understands that he could have ended the fight a long time ago and just wanted to play around. But Chenbai mentions he simply wanted to rest a bit because his spirit was exhausted. Even though he could recover his physical and mental strength, the accumulated pressure wasn't erased. If he had rested, he could have lost his sanity, and for that, he's thankful for the help he received. The demon questions what he just heard before leaving, saying there were only a few fights left. Despite thinking there were few levels left, Salisbury explains there were still around 300 levels, many of them empty. Kenbai remembers that each level should have a lord because of the Abyss's desire, even recreating the same enemies multiple times. But he explains that there's literally nothing, just a void. That's because battles between powerful beings can destroy many levels, and the deeper it gets, the more likely that is to happen. Upon hearing that, Chenbai thanks the demon, saying he might try to visit him after the challenge. Salisbury promises he will make him experience a perfect illusion. After passing the 235th level, Chenbai prepares for the next challenge. However, he starts skipping several levels because they were destroyed, bringing Chenbai to level 279. Our protagonist wonders how many floors were destroyed, thinking next time he could ask Elmia or Salisbury. Arriving at level 279, he discovers the enemy would be Baphomet and the condition is to defeat him after passing through the labyrinth. Kenbai says he knows this enemy known as the god of the Torn Tribe, making him one of the 6 gods Elmia mentioned. Our protagonist notices the blood-stained floor and the dark place in that labyrinth. He believes the challenge is just beginning, as it is said that Baphomet attacks anyone who enters the labyrinth. At that moment, the monster approaches the protagonist from behind. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.